We'll now call this work session to order. Superintendent Hyde?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, I apologize. I'm pulling up my...
While you're doing that, I'm going to read our Who Are We statement,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
just because it's always a good reminder. So this is the Who Are We statement that we created at our retreat a few months ago. We are the Polk County Leadership Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are operating with integrity, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other, establishing a culture where our stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth, and supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. Collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. We hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for the luxury of time here to pull up. I had the wrong agenda pulled up, so I apologize. At this time, I'd like to bring up, we have several items on the superintendent's report today. First and foremost is a return and a renewal of the presentation on the internal funds audit. So at this time, I'd like to ask Jennifer Christensen to please come to the microphone. As you recall, board members, we began the presentation, but Ms. Christensen was dealing with a cold or flu at the time, so she asked if we could revisit, and we agreed. So Ms. Christensen, the floor is yours.
As he said, we went through the financial statements last month, so I'll kind of go a little faster during that part of the presentation. But if you guys have questions, as always, just please feel free to ask. And so I'm just going to flash these up and just remind everyone that with internal funds, these are the funds that, not state funds, but these are funds that are raised at the schools by the students and used for the students, things such as admission events, football game tickets, fundraisers. And so you could see our summary here that compares year over year. And with internal funds, the money that's raised really should be spent in the same year that it's raised. And so you could see we had revenue of $6.3 million, and we had expenditures of almost $6.3 million. So that's exactly what we would expect when it comes to internal funds. And another thing to remind everyone, we had a new accounting standard, GASB 84, that was effective this year. And basically what it did, I kind of go back one slide, we have in the middle there, we have $10 million of, last year it was called internal accounts payable, and this year it's called net position. And really that's pretty much, we had some changes in the names, and the internal funds are being treated as a custodial fund, as a fiduciary activity. And then in our footnotes, some of the more sensitive footnotes that I wanted to bring up would be the investments. We are required to disclose if there's a concentration of investments in one type of investment. So we had 6.9% were invested in corporate notes. And then we always disclose uncertainties, and right now COVID-19 would still be considered an uncertainty when it comes to internal funds, because it can certainly, and it has affected the amount of activity that flows through internal funds from year to year. So we like to disclose that there could be another effect in this upcoming year, depending on how things go with COVID. And when we're doing the internal funds audits, we do a lot of compliance testing, and so these are the different areas. We look at admission events, contracts, cash receipts, cash disbursements, and we look at a sample that includes items from every school. So we make sure that every school is tested, and that's where the bulk of our findings come from. And so, and this is kind of where things went downhill a little bit last month. So this is kind of what I wanted to focus on a little bit today. This first chart just shows the average findings per school. And keeping in mind that every year we pick a sample, and so sometimes it's kind of the luck of the draw whether we have a finding or not. But over the total population, we would expect the number to be pretty steady over the years. And so you could see from 2017 through 2021, the average is right there between 0.5 and 1 finding per school. So that, again, would be as expected. Here, we do a breakdown to show what percentage of schools or number of schools had 0 findings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we always have, when we look in the category of 5 or more, I always say there's usually an instance where there may be something going on at that school, especially, we've had a lot more of turnover when it comes to financial secretaries, just due to the environment right now. And so you could see that was 3%, but looking at the other side of the chart, we had 84% of our schools that had 1 finding or less. So that's a great stat to have. So one thing that we wanted to point out are some of the more common findings that we have. And we audit the internal accounts for several different Florida school districts, and some of the common findings we see are the same at every district. And the first one being the fundraising activity forms. Anytime a club or a group wants to have a fundraiser, they have to fill out a request form ahead of time, and get the principal's approval before they start the fundraiser. And so we had 11 instances where the form either wasn't filled out or it just wasn't approved by the principal prior to the fundraiser occurring. And then the next one has to do with deficit account balances. We've had a couple, and again, we had 11 of those this year, and we did have a couple instances where there were some accounts that had deficit balances. And when I say deficit, this is for one single account. So a couple of times it was the yearbook account. So in total, the school does not have a deficit balance. They don't have negative cash, or they don't have negative, a deficit balance in total, but it's just one individual account that has a deficit balance. And a couple of those instances were from things that maybe happened during COVID, where, like, yearbooks is a good example. If the school didn't sell enough yearbooks in the 2019, 2020 year, they still had to make the payment to the yearbook company. So it caused them to go into deficit, and they have a plan to work out of that deficit, but it is taking a little bit of time because it's something they couldn't turn around in just 1 year. So we had some of those, and then you could see deposits not made timely to the bank, and funds collected not turned in daily. So anytime a funds get collected by a teacher, if a student turns them in to the teacher then needs to turn it in to the front office. And we just had some cases where they weren't turned in that day. And then the last one is another fundraiser report. After the fundraisers are done, there's a sales report that has to be completed so that the schools realize how much profit or loss that fundraiser earned, so that they can kind of analyze it to see if that's a fundraiser that they want to do again in the future. And so those reports are due 10 days after the end of the fundraiser. And so we had 7 instances where the report either wasn't completed or it just wasn't completed within the 10 days at the end of the fundraiser. Here, I know this is a small chart, but if you look at it, it's just more to be able to visually see the differences in the number of findings from the last 3 years. And so you could see the gold bars, that's this year. So you can see there are some trends, but like I said before, it could be the luck of the draw of which items we select to test the compliance on. But you could see the various findings, and one, if you kind of look down, the one that kind of stands out a little bit to me, we have towards the bottom, purchase order approved after the purchase. We had a handful of findings a couple years ago, and then it went to 0. And part of that is a change in the process for purchase orders, moving more towards an electronic process. So that's really helped with that, finding, so that the schools no longer have those findings. And so as far as the district-wide recommendations, we do issue a report for each school on the compliance issues that we come across, and then we issue district-wide recommendations. And so we had 2 this year. The first one has to do with the accounts receivable at the technical colleges. And I wanted to start out by saying, each year we have an audit adjustment because of differences between old accounts receivable at the technical colleges and when it gets written off for our purposes versus when the district writes it off. And in the 2021 school year, the district did write off the old, they were approved by the board to be written off. So the old AR were written off. So we now, our numbers agree as far as the accounts receivable. So in the future, we shouldn't see any of those adjustments anymore. So I wanted to first point that out. But when we were going through and testing the invoices for the technical colleges, we did notice that there were several invoices we picked 11 to look at, and 6 of the ones we looked at were for students who either maybe didn't attend, they registered for class, but they either didn't attend or maybe they attended for a few days and then dropped the class and didn't attend the rest of the semester. So they're invoices that should have been voided, and they're amounts that really aren't owed to the district or to the technical colleges because the student dropped out before the commitment period where they would have to pay the tuition. And so that's something that we talked to them about, and we define this as a significant deficiency. And the reason why and what that means is it's not material to the financial statements. So the accounts receivable amount is not a large number, compared to the rest of the internal funds. But it's something that we feel is important enough to bring to your attention that it's a process that probably needs to be looked at, and I believe it is being looked at, and some changes being made on when the invoices, a lot of times it's because the registration, the office where the student registers or drops a class, it doesn't always translate over to the financial office where the invoices are being generated. And so I believe that they're going to start working on some of that process so that the communication improves, and so that if a student does drop a class and doesn't attend, that the finance office will know about it so that they're able to void that invoice, so that the invoice doesn't show up as outstanding when it shouldn't be. For the second item, this is what we call an improvement point. It's just something we noticed during the audit, and we just wanted to bring it up. We think it's a good idea. It's not considered a deficiency, but the manual for the internal funds, we feel like should be reviewed and updated. It's about I think it's about 9 or 10 years old, and during that time, I mentioned earlier, the purchase order process has changed. It's become more electronic. And so sometimes the policies and the rules behind it need to kind of change and be updated, or even the processes that are defined in the manual need to be updated to comply with these changes that are occurring. And also there's sometimes, changes in school board rules, possibly bidding rules. And so you just want to make sure that your manual complies with these rules, that it agrees with the rules. And so we had recommended that the manual be reviewed and updated, and the accounting department had mentioned that that's an item, that's a task that's on their list to do for this school year. So we expect that to be updated by the time we start our audit next year. And so with that, I always just like to thank the people I work with. I work with the accounting department, Lisa, Luke, and their team. And I mean, they do an amazing job every year. They pull so much information for us when we come out, and they always have it ready. And anytime we give them a new list, they have it turned around quickly. And that's so helpful for us as auditors. And so I always like to say thank you to them, and then also thank you to Carol and her team of internal auditors. And so with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to, yes?
Ms. Miller?
Superintendent, this might be for you or your staff, but I have a couple of questions. The internal guide where we find issues with fundraising inside schools, either with PTA groups or, the ones you showed here, Do we have a guide that is available online? Like, we should be able to give them this so these aren't happening, but I don't know how accessible it is.
All of that information is part of their regular training and reminders. We put out reminders each year, but it is provided for them electronically, and I believe it's part of a comprehensive document where all the school bookkeepers are trained on these things.
Okay.
Whether or not specific teachers are fully trained becomes a responsibility at the school level. And so we'll follow up, because I have some questions to follow up after this morning's presentation as well.
And I have one other question, and this also might be for the superintendent. I appreciate your work here because it's given me a lot of information. I have one high school that had considerable yearbook debt that went on for, it's probably 8 years now. And there was discussion at one time to find a resource to pay that debt, and they have a plan. We haven't made progress in that, so who is responsible for following up? Besides me asking questions to make sure that my schools, when I say, do I have any schools with significant debt, who at the district is the point person to ask what we're doing to follow up with those schools?
Becomes the responsibility of both accounting and of our finance department, who would manage that issue with the school to ensure that each year, if there was a plan addressed or provided and was approved, that they're actually following through with that plan. So I can absolutely follow up with you after this, or
Sure,
ask
I'll
Ms. Jenkins to follow up with you to find out who that is.
Sure, I'll send an email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fields?
I had a couple of questions. I don't know who would answer this. Do we still have the courier coming to get deposits from the schools? The courier, does anybody know that? Is that still in place?
Ms. Jenkins is indicating, yes, we still have a courier that.
Okay, thank you. I want to commend the staff and the schools for the great work that they have done during a very challenging period, COVID. I remember when I first came on the school board, we had a lot of issues, a lot of things that were just not where they needed to be. And I think with the staff working hard, and I think with the assistance of Ms. Matthews and her team, we've come a long ways. I know we have a ways to go, but I want to commend them for the work. And I know that we've been working on the technical college issue for a long time. I know that. And I know that Ms. Matthews has been working with the staff to ensure that we deal with the significant deficiency. And I think we're making progress. And next year, hopefully, we won't have this issue up as you just referenced. So I just want to commend the staff for the great work that they've done, especially during a very difficult time during COVID.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Fortney?
Yeah, having lost a monies collected form as a classroom teacher, I know that our financial secretaries are on it, and I do appreciate that as a heavy lift. I don't think people realize the volume of work at the school level for something that appears simple. There is tracking, and I think our taxpayers should be very proud of this. Thank you.
Ms. Cunningham?
Yes, I was just going to say thank you also to everyone involved. I know Ms. Matthews does, and her team does a great job, and I'm very pleased that we're continuing the 100% audit. We did that, changed that a few years ago, that we do all of our schools. It was interesting to note in the findings that I believe I'm seeing the same issues continuous. Am I right? So I don't know if there's a certain area when we do our training that we need to zero in on, because it seems like it's pretty much the same things that we've seen year after year, and I get it. We've been through some trying times lately. So I would anticipate that that this audit would improve next year as we try to get back to some sense of normalcy, and that perhaps we can zero in on training on these particular areas with the most common findings. That's all I had to say. But thank you so much for the work that you do. It's very, very important that we monitor our funds. Thank you.
And the audit's very timely, and that feeds into one of our new strategic plan goal areas of efficient and equitable use of our resources. Because financial management, and to your point, Ms. Cunningham, when you look at the slide, I believe it's slide 9, and you see the last 3-year history, we would expect to see those issues continue to decline. But as was pointed out by Ms. Christensen, some of those may be related to new employees who are new to their role, but they are you could chunk these based off training opportunities, for example, collection and maintenance of fundraising activities and whatnot. And so I'll be working with the team to identify, and that will become part of our strategic plan goal initiatives to ensure that we continue to see improvements in all of these areas, and we provide the right training and support to our school-based staff to do so.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you. The only question I had was on slide 8, if I may. Slide 8 captured, the most common findings. When you list a number of instances, I'm assuming that's one instance per school, but that 11 is not an indication of 5 instances happening within the same school.
No, but it can have, one school can have more than one instance.
But that number of
So-
11, for example, fundraising activity would reflect 11 different schools,
No,
not 5
no,
instances.
It would be 11 times we had the findings. So there could be one school that had it, had it 2 times. They would count as
Perfect.
2 on here.
Okay.
So it's
And-
not 11 different schools, it's 11 times.
All right, and then that becomes the opportunity for us to do the drill down to identify, are there individuals or schools that we need to reinforce and provide additional training and supports to? So, thank you. Ms. Miller?
I had one other question. Thank you, Superintendent. When you have the number of findings of 5 or more, if there's a significant, like if there were 10, are those flagged individually? Or you're saying we've had 5 or more, 4 schools have had 5 or more findings? The more is what I'm asking about. Like how many more are we talking 20
I
findings?
think we had one school that had 6. No,
Okay, okay.
If it got to the point where we had probably any more than that, we would
Okay.
sit down with Carol during the audit.
Okay.
And a lot of times, what we'll do with, when we have that in other school districts, is we'll sit down with internal audit and come up with a plan, because they likely will want to go to that school, start
Right.
digging in a little deeper at
Training.
that school. So we'll do that during the audit before we even finish, if we
Okay.
come across something,
Thank
a
you.
large number.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming
letting
back
me
this morning.
Come back.
At this time, I'd like to bring Jeff Hancock, Senior Director for Science and Social Studies, up to the podium. I'd also like to bring Joe McNaughton, Chief Academic Officer, to the dais as well. As the board recalls, we pulled the Nearpod item from the previous board meeting prior to making a recommendation for the board to adopt it based on some concerns that were expressed to us. I wanted to provide, in an effort to be both transparent and to address any questions or concerns that you or general members of the public have as it relates to Nearpod, an opportunity to hear both from our staff and from the vendor as to what steps can be taken, why it was recommended, including its history in our school district. We had previously utilized Nearpod in the school district beginning in 2016. And again, we want to be able to address those issues before any formal recommendation is brought back to the board. Just as a reminder, this will be brought to 2 workshops before it's brought back for a final recommendation. So you will see this topic again on the next January workshop meeting. So there's 2 weeks for the board members to provide me with any further questions they'd like to see us address, so that you have a very comprehensive understanding of Nearpod and what steps and protections we can put in place as it relates to the curriculum, the resources, and those that are provided by some of the supplemental providers as well. And then again, you will likely see this topic come back before you in February if the recommendation is going to be to move forward with an adoption. But again, we're here today to go ahead and hear more information and background on Nearpod and what steps we can take to address some of the concerns that have been provided to us. All yours, sir.
Okay, good morning. So the curriculum team, when ESSER funding became available, got together and was talking about what things could be brought to help students. You passed Gizmos last time. We thought that would be an excellent addition, as long as some other tools that'll be coming up in the future. But one of the biggest focuses we saw was student engagement. Students have a screen time issue, and teachers have not really adjusted over the years, myself included. When I was teaching, there wasn't screens so much as there are now. So when we started discussing this, was one of the options that we saw as a way to engage kids that have a much shorter attention span than they did when we were students. So that was the primary discussion amongst trying to bring Nearpod to Polk County. The contract that we proposed was 75,000 students, which is grades 3 through 12. Being sensitive that there is some research, and I saw Maddie Freed in the back, for younger students and screen time. So we wanted to keep that in mind as well. So that's why we started grades 3 through 12. Currently, Nearpod has 21 districts in the state of Florida, including some large districts, and if you'd like those, I can send those to you, that they currently partner with. We, like Mr. Hyde said, have about 10 schools in the district that use Nearpod currently of their own accord. I know I saw Miss Solano in the back, and when she applied for the Teacher of the Year contest, her submission was actually done using a Nearpod lesson. I just wanted to also bring that up. So, so those are some things that are currently happening. When we looked at this, the ESSER funds required that learning loss be a part of why you would apply for these funds. So I do believe that we are currently setting up things that will address learning loss, but I don't want to say they're unengaging, but they could use some assistance in some of those things, but that had to be addressed. So I know that was one of the questions that came up. Why is it for this, that, or the other? It is for learning loss. We can use it to help with learning loss. We can use it for building lessons, so that way we have individuals who may be teaching lessons that are less content knowledge ready. Then we have some of those things there and available for them as well. And it could also be, we also push out review courses directly to students, so teachers don't even see it, and it's a way that could keep students engaged, as opposed to, here's a packet. Packets aren't engaging. Students are engaged by activities. This will help with that engagement. So I've read that individuals are concerned about this being a curriculum. It does have curriculum, but the reason that we're seeking it is for the engagement side and to help with our current curriculum. What curriculum will teachers, I know that there's some concerns about teachers and what curriculum they will see. I have just passed out to you a user guide on managing the availability. As a curriculum team, when we walk classrooms and when we manage anything, we start with the benchmark, the standard in mind. And that's what we do when we look in classrooms, when we're building things. So this will be addressed in much the same way. If it does not meet a standard that is currently accepted or in CPOMs, it doesn't need to be available to our teachers. Our teachers, thus, would not see it. We can turn it off at the district level, and anything we turn off, the school level will not be able to turn on. The school level, in addition, could turn off materials, and that is addressed in here. So we could turn off X, Y, and Z, and at the school level, they could turn off R and Q if they wanted to. So there are safeguards in regards to what we can put in front of people. I will say that between the last board meeting and this board meeting, these funds were approved by the commissioner. So for ESSER to be spent, I would, and I will say this, I have been in another county that used it at a large school district, and I worked primarily in the DA schools. And I will tell you that the difference in instruction that I saw with Nearpod and how it integrates, there it integrated into Canvas, here it integrates into Schoology, and without it was pretty striking. You know, that extra 10 minutes of engagement you get with a student who is gonna either engage on the computer or engage on their own personal phone was very meaningful. The years after they implemented their initiative with Nearpod and one-to-one devices, their scores went up about 3 points across the board in each cell. So there's my pitch. I'll pass it over to Joe. But if you have any questions, we did ask the Nearpod representatives to come. So if you'd like any input from them, they can also provide. Yes, ma'am.
What school district, if I may ask, did you witness?
Orange County.
Orange County, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that this product improves student engagement, but you didn't tell us how. I'm interested in knowing what is it that causes them to be more engaged when they use this product?
Sure, there's multiple things. I'll give you you can build formative assessments that are fun. So kids do not like to take tests, and nor do we really like to give kids
And so this
tests.
product does that? It allows you to build those kinds of assessments out
Yes, sir.
more easily, I assume, than other products?
More easily, I don't know if more easily is the right term. I don't know that it's easier, it's more entertaining. I don't know how to say it other than that. I'll give you an example. They have a product called Time to Climb within it. And let's say I asked you something about the First and Second Amendment. If I were to put that in a quiz form, all the kids get little characters. So you're a bear and you're a penguin and maybe you're something else, and you climb up this mountain. Now, it doesn't show you anybody else's score, but you see all the kids climbing up the mountain. So all the kids see their little characters climbing up the mountain. They get instantaneous feedback on whether they're right or wrong in a non-threatening manner. That is the engagement piece that kids need, because when they play video games, they get immediate feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. And when they fail, they hit reset and start over. And that is the advantage of having one-to-one devices with items like this, is when kids fail, which they will do, and I think that's perfectly acceptable, first attempt in learning, they go back and retry it, and thus increases the engagement because they feel success in their way, not in the student next to theirs way.
So they get instantaneous feedback, and they get something that's entertaining.
Yes, sir.
And I understand that. I believe that instantaneous feedback is incredibly important. So, but are there other products that don't do that? Or this, how does this product do it better? Have we looked at, maybe we haven't looked at other products, and that's okay, that's an acceptable answer, but I'm just trying to understand why this is a better product than something else on the market.
So I will tell you, in years past being here, not having one-to-one devices, we did pilot Nearpod right at the beginning of the pandemic. We piloted Nearpod because teachers asked for it. Teachers are asking for it. We have schools that ask for it, and it's the same reason I brought gizmos last month. Teachers asking for it because they know the utilization with their kids. With a one-to-one device, it obviously makes it much easier. Without it, they could still use it without a device. It still can be used by the teacher without a device. It just becomes a little less meaningful on the kid in terms of feedback.
So that's another feature, they can use their own devices to access it.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Okay.
And also with that point is that we also had schools within Polk already using it. So we weren't going outside of the district to look for something. We were looking for something that was already working within Polk.
So we have a product that we have familiarity with.
With some schools, I believe it's,
We have
10
10 schools, and we have numerous teachers and departments that purchase it out of their own pocket.
Ms. Fortney, then Ms. Cunningham.
When I was doing my research on this, because as I looked at it online, and I want to thank you for the over-hour conversation you had with me about it, it reminded me, and I told you that day, of the old FCAT Explorer that was put out by the state. And if you're not familiar with it, Sarah Beth's shaking her head. But you know, for science at least, and those kids, it was a tool for them to excel and catch up. You know, so the acceleration piece was important. And again, it was before one-on-one, so my one little computer was hot all day long with, and they could do it at home, et cetera. So I want to thank you for that, because I did have a bunch of questions when I looked at how much it cost, the number of kids, all that stuff, and you answered those quite well. Thank you.
Ms. Cunningham, then Ms. Fields.
Thank you. Question, you did note that we currently have 10 schools in our district using this, correct? How long have they been using it, if I may ask? Roughly,
I will say, since I've been here, we've had at least that number.
you have. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So in the
That-
4 years I've been here, we've
Okay.
had at least that number with pockets of individual teachers also. I will say it feels like it's more prevalent in social studies than it is in other content areas.
Interesting. Okay. So in the schools that are currently using this, what type of educational gains have we seen compared to maybe ones that don't? I know that's very difficult because there's tons of factors, including, most importantly, the teacher in front of the classroom. But if this is used to help us, particularly in, as you said, to be used for learning loss, what have you seen, or is there data yet, or just talk to me?
We can go ahead and actually pull data from.
Can you?
Because we have the schools, so we can, I mean, I don't know if Jeff has any
I can
answer
just
now.
address one.
Sure.
Like off the top of my head. Lake
Sure.
Alfred Poly's civics team uses it,
Yes.
and their scores very much beat their socioeconomic demographic. So what I mean by that is, if we're number 4 in socioeconomic, then your score for civics should be about 4th in middle schools.
I
Does that make
understand.
sense?
I understand.
So they are not 4th, but they are very, very high performing when it comes to that subject. So that's the one I know off the top of my head, where they utilize it pretty much every day. And they very much outkick their coverage. I don't know how else to
Sure.
say it other than that.
Okay, that's kind of what I was asking. Super. And if you, as time goes on, if you can, give us some data, I think that would be very helpful to
We can
everyone.
go ahead and definitely do that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
I'd like to have the names of the school districts that's doing this. I also was wondering, is it possible to get a demonstration link so that we can kind of see what that looks like? I don't know if that's possible.
Yes, ma'am, I asked before I came up here. The answer to that is yes, we can get you a demonstration link for everyone. Would you like me to read the districts that have them?
No, if you can just give me the list, email the
Sure,
list.
I'll email
Because
the
I think
list.
you said it was quite a few.
It's 21,
Yes, sir, if you can just provide the
If
list
you'll
probably to
email-
everybody.
In
I would
Florida.
think.
21 in Florida.
If you'll email that to me, I'll
Will
forward
do.
that to the board. Thank you.
Okay, and then I wanted to know the professional training for the staff and the implementation process for the students to make sure that we get what we hope to see long-term. And I would like to see the results, the outcomes of the 10 schools that's currently using it.
Okay, I think we can do that. We can get to 10 schools. Shouldn't take very long. Implementation process for training. So as I spoke with Ms. Fortney, we're a little late in the year. I think whenever you drop something on teachers this late in the year, it's after Christmas. And I guess that's the best way I can say it. After Christmas, we know as a curriculum and instruction team, the majority of new things that come in before Christmas, because once the new year rolls around, teachers start preparing for the test. I mean, that is their focus. So the idea was to turn it on, train our teams on, and when I say our teams, science, social studies, math, and ELA. I will say that social studies has already had pretty in-depth training on it. Science has had a little bit. With the idea that in the summer, we would then ramp up what our activities were, and on contact day, and moving forward, we would roll those out to schools and do all the activities how we train on contact day would be trained through Nearpod to get that access. In the meantime, we know we have teachers that are using it and would utilize it, and we would highlight those teachers on contact day that are successful in using the program between now and then. And we've done that with other products that we have. We did that with Legends of Learning. We've done that in other areas, so it's that same kind of training model where we let the new users, the early adopters, go ahead and take off with it, give coaches trainings and things like that, but then expect full implementation to start next school year, just kind of right now based on the timeline of possible adoption of this. Or
Thank you.
approval, not adoption, that's the wrong word, approval of this.
Ms. Fortney, then Ms. Miller, then Ms. Reynolds, Ms. Wyatt.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read somewhere where Nearpod is research-based, and we see an increase in scores with students with disabilities and our English language learners. But my real question is, how do we pay for it moving forward if we don't have ESSER funds?
Great question. So there's a reason why this came under science and social studies. So when ESSER funds run out, science and social studies will be up for adoptions, which are my areas. The idea being that if we have enough teacher usage and we see movement and growth, and that is the ask, we carve out, if you will, some instructional materials money to augment, not supplement, to augment the instructional materials that we currently buy, and it would be done through that process. So that is the plan, that those 2 years, we carve out enough money to take care of that, if that is what our teachers want, and the data shows that we should be doing that.
Ms. Miller, then Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I have a couple of questions. I tried to make a list to go down. First of all, usage. We talked about students with disabilities. Is this program adaptive to all students, including center school students? Is it able to be adapted with either devices?
I would have to punt on that to the Nearpod crew.
If you could come forward, please.
Either way.
Don't go far.
Ms. Miller, just to clarify, are you asking if it lends itself to adaptive tech in its use? Or are you asking, will it adapt to the student's instructional level?
Both. Can you use adaptive equipment to access it? And two, can it be modified for instruction level?
Yeah, I can answer that, and thank you for the question. We do provide a number of different options within Nearpod to ensure that students that need assistive technology can use that with the platform. One example of that is we have an immersive reader that is built in. That reader will actually read the text aloud to a student. It can even translate the text if needed, and the student and the teacher desire for that to be available. So yes, we look at that. There are also additional ways for students to even respond. So in certain cases where, some students the teacher provides an open-ended question where some students need to type in, other students would be able to record their answer and submit that as well. So we allow for audio responses in addition to typed responses.
Thank you. That was my question. As far as usage, we have teachers with different learning styles, and we've had programs. You mentioned Freckles, Smarty Ants. We've had lots of programs. Is there a requirement for this to be used? Because there's two sides of that. One, I want to give teachers autonomy to their rooms. But second, this is a huge investment. And if we're going to invest in it, are people going to use it?
Well, again, just as you said, is teacher autonomy with this. One of the main components is this is that our current curriculum is set in either one style or another, and sometimes teachers adapt that one way or other. They may take something that's in a PowerPoint and actually make it into something for their .cam or something like that. So the idea is actually taking some of the already done in curriculum, embed it within Schoology. So it would be you'd go into your LMS and you can still use all the capabilities of like Schoology. So again, I think there's flexibility with the teacher, but the idea is that everything is housed in one place. Again, with such an expensive endeavor as one-to-one, providing materials for that, for teachers who are learning that. That's not my native way of learning. I'm trying to get there, but it's not my native one. It's my kids' native environment. But allowing that flexibility for teachers, because Jeff and I may go in, look at the same standard, have been in the same planning session, but when you walk into our classrooms, just with how our comfort levels are and stuff, and again, it's providing the support. We will have early adopters that will run with this. There'll be others that will see some benefits of it, but the idea is that it's not going to be used not the intention for every day, every use, every second of the classroom. There's so many other things within our classrooms, such as centers and stations that have to be done, so.
Have we had a tech-based supplement program for science and social studies like this one will be? Have we had one previously? And if we did, what was it? We have not. So this is something new for those two departments.
We do have Legends of Learning that
Okay.
we've used since I've gotten here, and we are the #1 user by volume in the country of that program.
Are we going to sustain that program?
I think so. It flows well with this as well. So with the implementation of gizmos, and so going back to just pandemic, right? We have students in it, and in a one-to-one environment, if I'm the teacher, and we've seen this past week walking classrooms, if I'm the teacher, I have kids at all different levels and in all different places, and I can give them things that they can do and get immediate feedback while I'm working with my lowest or highest, it doesn't matter. If I'm working with this set of students, then I need to grasp this concept. I have that ability in that setting with all these different platforms to push this out through Schoology. So let me say that it does not take the place of our LMS. It would still be pushed through Schoology. That I might have a kid over here working on Legends of Learning because he's truly a gamer, and that's how he learns best or she learns best. And then I've got a kid over here who is doing a lesson I built in Nearpod, and I have a group that is reading with me in the front of the room, and we're looking at text. So I think that's the key, is that the multiple modalities that we have in the classroom and the opportunities for teachers to use this to expand and reach all of the students in their class and it's not just, by the way, I'll just say, it's not just about Nearpod, this is about all of our opportunities in the one-to-one setting, is the most advantageous usage of all of these things. So I wouldn't recommend doing that because, again, we have teachers that are using this like crazy, mostly on the elementary level. I will say that, it's mostly elementary. And I anticipate that gizmos will be mostly secondary. And when kids go out, it becomes an opportunity for us to send something to, by the way, there's back-end reports, so if I run that quiz or that formative assessment with teachers, I can go back in behind it as the teacher, click a button and pull and see how all the kids did, which then I could load into my gradebook. Becomes very smooth and efficient in terms of getting those things. But that's not neither here nor there, but that is opportunities for those people to use at home as well. So if we're one-to-one and my child is out with COVID or he's been quarantined, I can still push those lessons to them, and they can do those asynchronously in a more meaningful way than a packet.
Packets aren't successful for
They're
most
not
students.
successful.
My last question is, the district staff is assuring that supplemental materials, anything, not only Nearpod, is linked to the best standards, or the Florida standards, which are now becoming the best standards.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. And I will tell you for Legends, what we've done science-wise, we went through every single game and lesson, all, and we linked all of them on our map to where they are appropriate.
Thank you.
And just a point, Ms. Miller, I know our current curriculum staff, both in ELA and mathematics, are actually some of the writers of the best standards. So that is one thing, that is their baby, and they're not going to let anything deter with there are new benchmarks in mathematics and ELA, so.
I mean, it's in our best interest. They're learning our benchmarks, so they'll test to the benchmarks.
Right.
But that has been a concern. Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I made a list too, so I have a couple questions. Who will determine what lessons are unavailable? And I'm assuming that will be done before it's rolled out to teachers. Is it the same process as going through each of the lessons and connecting them to a standard?
Well, I think the process will be this, is that we can unmap everything. And just like current curriculum practices, our curriculum specialists go through, look at those items and say, this is the content. You know, again, with talking about the best standards in ELA and mathematics, we have people that are doing professional development across the state for training people on the best standards, so they know the standards itself. So going ahead and unmapping and then putting out what is appropriate would be the step for it to ensure that.
Thank you. And so does Nearpod, is it all the same lessons always, or I would guess from time to time they add lessons? Is that,
Yeah, so it's on an ongoing basis. So currently, we, over the summer, remapped all of our content to be aligned to the new standards. And then as new content partners or our curriculum team build new lessons, those are added. And districts that have that high-level district partnership with us are first flagged of those things that they're coming so they can map them before they're rolled out.
awesome, thank you. And could I have the two of you introduce yourself, just so we have
Yeah.
it on the record?
Yes, of course. Maggie Center, I'm the district partnership manager for Florida specifically.
Hi, and I'm Daniel Green. I'm the head of product for Nearpod.
Thank you both for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Ms. Fortney?
My fellow board members hit my last two comments with the last two questions.
Mr. Wilson?
So this is more a comment, I guess, than a question. I have some concerns, frankly, about CRT and critical race theory. First of all, in the state of Florida, it's illegal. But putting that aside for a moment, there's some other challenges with that. However well-intended CRT started, and I think it was well-intended when it started, I think the goal was to find avenues forward in our society to address inequities and inequalities. But it has morphed, and it has become incredibly divisive. We don't need divisiveness. What we're trying to do is bring people together. We're trying to create an environment of inclusiveness, not divisiveness. And that's just a reality of where we are with it as it has morphed, I think. I went to a link to your product, and I found a lesson wherein we asked students to break up into two different groups. And we asked one of the groups to determine why they were different and why their difference mattered and what they could do to close that gap and not be different. We don't do that. That's just wrong. It's wrong on every possible level. We don't ask students to break into groups and identify why they're different than their classmates. And you know what? We can't say that's okay in one scenario and not okay in another scenario. We can't do that. That's hypocritical. And it's not what we do in education. Maybe that's okay for adults, but it's not okay for children. We need to be bringing them together. We need to be making sure they feel included on every level. So I have some issues with that, and I have some concerns about that. So for my vote, I need to know that there won't be a possibility of anyone doing that in our classrooms.
And that leads me to a couple questions I have, and then some clarification in summary for the board. And Ms. White, I saw your hand up. But you just mentioned that you, in order to align to best standards here in Florida, that you did the mapping. So at what point, knowing that CRT is not allowed in the state of Florida to be taught, are you vetting content before it even gets to us? Because I don't believe the burden, I'm going to be honest, I don't believe the burden should rest on my staff. I think as the product vendor and product support specialist, you bear the burden of ensuring that you're compliant with Florida standards and Florida expectations. So at what level are you vetting all that content so that that information doesn't, again, become an additional burden on an already strained staff?
Yeah, so the current content that lives within Nearpod does not teach CRT and is aligned to Florida state standards. There is the ability for a teacher or staff to create their own lessons, and without seeing the lesson you're specifically referring to, it is unclear if that's a lesson that Nearpod created or a lesson that a teacher created themselves. We'd have to check on that first. Does that answer that
So
question?
you're saying that all the content that you will provide us at its core has been vetted and filtered to ensure that there is no CRT references, none of that's embedded within there?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then, as you just mentioned, we then own the responsibility of training and ensuring that staff understand what the limitations are for the curriculum and whatnot, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Couple quick things just to kind of, Ms. Wyatt, I'll come back to your question. I want to address a few of the questions that the board asked. I want to provide further clarification. So the first one was about teacher autonomy. Nearpod does not erode, nor does it dictate lessons and activities. Our current curriculum adoption process does not either. When we adopt curriculum materials, whether it's a textbook or supplemental resources, that's not your core instruction. Those are supplements to core instruction that the teacher has access to as a resource to deliver and address standards and benchmarks that are required by the state of Florida. Oftentimes, and I don't mean this for the board, but for others who are listening, it's important to clarify that, because I think a lot of people assume that we buy a textbook, and that's our that's our curriculum, and we're going to teach it from page 1 to the very last page between now and the end of the school year. And that's simply not the case. Teachers quite frequently deviate from the textbook to infuse lessons and activities, and I think that gets to the question about teacher autonomy. There is the science of teaching, which the district absolutely and the Board of Education controls. What has to be taught, to what level of specificity and rigor does it have to be taught, how are we going to assess it, how are we going to evaluate it, all those things. That remains within our purview. The art of teaching is how teachers will deliver that content, whether it's through hands-on activities, whether it's through other types of engaging activities, whether it's through project-based activities. That's the art of teaching that we so carefully support and direct professional development on. So teacher autonomy in this regard is not eroded. It becomes a supplement. And I think, quite honestly, what hasn't been addressed, and whether it's Nearpod or some other product, and I mean no offense to Nearpod team, what this becomes is a repository for highly effective, highly engaging lessons and activities. Teachers, for the first time, will have an opportunity to basically upload something so everyone else within their grade level, their content area, can see that lesson and activity, take it for their own, modify it accordingly depending on what's going on in his or her classrooms. It becomes an opportunity we currently do not have. Lessons may get handed around within a school building. You know, I think back to when I taught in the classroom and inherited a 4-drawer filing cabinet from my predecessor, science teacher, and every week's lessons were in there in a file. And essentially, that person taught the same lesson every year during week 1, during week 2, during week 3. This goes well beyond that and allows for far more creativity amongst our teachers and to address some of the concerns for our students as well. As far as the implementation, and unfortunately, they had some limitations in discussing how we would support this. And I hate to keep going back to the strategic plan, but when we talk about the goal area of developing highly effective teachers and administrators, part of that is professional development. And the calendar committee has had a really good conversation of late about how to best utilize early release days for professional development. We've talked about this before. Deploying 110,000 devices to students in our school district to be one-to-one is the easiest part of the entire solution to go one-to-one. The most difficult part is training staff and ensuring that all of the resources and systems are in place to make them effective at its use. We don't want to be a device-rich school district. We want to be an instructionally diligent and effective school district that uses technology as a tool for learning, not just simply as, okay, every kid has a laptop, we should be proud of ourselves. And it's a huge investment. We talked about the fact that that's being done through a significant grant that we received. But as we look to this, it's important to note that training, as was discussed in the example that Jeff provided, Mr. Hancock, excuse me, was that we're going to utilize a train-the-trainer model for the remainder, if this is adopted, whether it's Nearpod or something else. The model that we will utilize, given the timeline that we're on, will be a train-the-trainer. So we will train our staff first, who then push out into schools, and we'll train a cadre of individuals at each school, who then become school-based, job-embedded professional development experts. We will then also utilize early release days and other opportunities to make sure that we're delivering PD, again, to ensure that as we go one-to-one, that we're utilizing them effectively. Parents do not want kids, and we do not want families operating under the auspices or the understanding or belief that going one-to-one means kids are staring at computer screens all day, because that is not what an effective one-to-one initiative does, nor is that what one-to-one instruction does. Also, making sure when we talk about the integration, I think Ms. Miller asked, is this something we're going to require because of the investment? And I think when you start off for the first year or two, you're really trying to draw interest. You're using your early adopters to leverage others, and then at some point, Ms. Miller, I would say the expectation is yes. After year 2, and this requires a discussion with PEA and others, what then is the expectation after a year or 2 of implementation as far as the utilization for all staff? Because again, what we're asking them to do is post their lessons in here, which then get posted into Schoology, which is a single sign-on for all of our students and families, so they can see all their lessons and activities in one single landing place. So I do believe it's a reasonable expectation to ask all staff to share their lessons to post their lessons there and to become acclimated, and that does not mean they have to utilize it every day. Making sure that you're posting your lesson activities does not mean you're being forced to use it if it's not applicable to the type of instruction or lessons that you're delivering. So I just want to provide a little bit more clarification there as to its use, and thank you for answering my question, which I'm going to be honest with you, is the big question, as Mr. Wilson pointed out. The big question and concern, the big elephant in the room is, if we adopt something, because you do utilize third-party providers that provide content materials, and now there were companies that were explicitly identified by several of our community stakeholders that they had concerns with. And so I find great comfort, and hopefully the board does, at this point, that you vet that to ensure that everything is aligned and limited to what Florida allows. So thank you for that. Ms. Wyatt and then Ms. Cunningham.
Thank you. We received a question from a constituent about the number of students served, because it's saying it's 75,000, and we have many more reported in the district. My guess is that that's charter students and pre-K students that it won't serve. Are there any other groups that would not be served by this?
It would be K through 2, the pre-K through
Okay.
2 students. It's
Will not be.
third, what was written in the proposal was third grade
Third and
through,
up,
so
okay.
that's why the discrepancies.
Perfect, thank you. And then I just wanted to make a comment. I had a teacher approach me this week about Nearpod, that she and her team had adopted it during the pandemic. And just talking about how much her students loved it, she's like, I met with them every Tuesday and Thursday, and it was supposed to be for 90 minutes, and we would get to the end of our 90 minutes, and they would beg me to start a new game that we could play, because in their mind, they're games. They're who can get to the mountain the fastest by answering the most right questions. And that was just her experience with it, that she's like, I was supposed to be on with them for 90 minutes, and they would beg me to be on for 3 hours, and we would do it, because what else were you going to do during the shutdown? But that's how much her students enjoyed some of the lessons that they have, that they kind of don't even realize that they're learning as much as they do, which was a cool experience, just to get some feedback on it. Thank you.
Ms. Cunningham.
Yes, sir. And looking at the financial piece, our price is, I rounded, $861,000 divided by 75,000 students. It costs $11.48 per student, and if you divide that over 3 years, right? $3 and something per student. So when you think about the opportunities to financially invest, as you indicated, in diverse modalities, right, to allow teachers and students the opportunity, it's not a lot of money. But I will say, I share the same concerns that you've heard from my colleague and Superintendent Hyde regarding the type of curriculum that can be accessed, because once you release that to a student or a family, you want to make sure that everything is appropriate internally. So I would echo that as well. But financially, to me, it looks like it would be a great investment for our district. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
So there may be some additional questions, but I just want to say thank you all for coming and answering our questions. And I want to thank Superintendent Hyde for the clarification as well. It's been very helpful to me, so thank you.
Thank you. So board members, as a next step, again, this will be brought back at the next meeting as a workshop item. So if you have any further questions or areas where you're contacted by a stakeholder, you need additional clarification, please reach out. Ms. Fields, Ms. Miller, Ms. Cunningham have asked for data. We will make sure we provide that for you as it relates to which school districts in the state of Florida currently utilize it. I know Dr. Allen, unfortunately he's not here. I know McKeel Charter Schools uses this program. But we will look at, now, and I will caution our team, when we do the data analytics for the schools that have already adopted this and currently are using it, we'll do it at the teacher level to show improvement over years past, not comprehensively across the school, because not everybody within a department or a school may be utilizing it. And I think, Mr. Wilson, that will get largely to your question and I know your interest as far as using resources for engagement and increased opportunities and outcomes for students. So we'll get those questions to you in a timely manner, and we'll invite you back to the next meeting if you don't mind, even if it's just our Florida representative. So thanks for being here today, and we'll move forward. Appreciate it.
If it does please the board, we can actually have a mini lesson so you can actually go and experience what the kids experience and see what's going on, just as to see what's going on with it.
Well, there were three things the board asked for. They asked for a list of the 21 schools in the district. They asked for data analysis on the schools they're currently utilizing, or teachers currently utilizing. And I believe they asked for a password or a login so they could get in and test the system and get some access to some lessons.
And we'll actually create one for you.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now Mr. Cochran's coming forward to have a discussion about our adult learning facilities, both our east and west adult schools.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm here to present today on a proposal for transforming the adult schools. But before I get started, I wanted to make a statement. This is a presentation about the current state of adult schools. It in no way should be considered an indictment or reflect poorly on the administration, teachers, and staff at our adult schools. On the contrary, the staff at these schools are among the best in the district, and they provide an important service to the community by assisting adults in achieving better employment through furthering their education, remediating their academic skills, and helping them obtain a GED. Additionally, our ESOL classes are the foundation that many immigrants use as a springboard to achieve the American dream. For the record, I'm proud of our adult schools, and I'm proud of the adults who decide to attend the school to improve their lives and better their education. Now, with that being said, there have been a lot of changes to adult programs over the past years, and some of that is what we need to consider today. So our current challenges for our adult schools are we are having a decline in enrollment. Some of that, the external factors that impact our enrollment is we have additional competition from online companies, and we have competition from some of our charter schools, New Beginnings being one of them, doing their job, going out, reaching out, and trying to help students achieve GEDs. The online companies, if a student will Google, how do I get my GED? The first thing that will come up are these online companies. So we have competition from them. Additionally, colleges, some colleges are no longer requiring diplomas for specific job trade programs. Now, this is a small number of colleges and programs. However, it does add to the shrinking pool of possible GED candidates. And there's a statewide enrollment decline, and actually it's a national decline in students going out and trying to achieve GEDs or attending adult programs. You'll see that in a later slide. Then we have our internal factors. We have recovery programs such as Fresh Start, which help students achieve a Penn Foster diploma. And we have the Grad Academy, which has done an excellent job in helping high school students catch up on their credits and therefore be able to graduate on time. All of these things and the combination of the wonderful problem to have of rising graduation rates, again, continues to shrink the pool of possible adult education candidates. Our current challenges, The Department of Education has implemented a program, IET, which requires us to integrate some of our adult ed programs with career and technical education skills. We are to not only assist them in getting a GED, but help them down a career pathway or into post-secondary education. The goals of increasing the number of adult education completers who earn the goal of the program to earn a degree or an industry certification. Additionally, we have been losing funding in workforce education. The amount has been decreased by $2 million since 2015. And unfortunately, the problem of decreasing enrollment also impacts the ability for us to collect the tuition, which is required by the state. Now, that's not a huge number to attend our adult schools, but it is, again, part of the money that we use to fund the program. So this is a state of the enrollment across the state of Florida. You can see that there has been a significant decline since 2016, 2017. And Polk has not been immune to that decline. This is our current number of students attending our adult schools and goes back to 2016. I do want to state that that you cannot look at these numbers and say, well, we have right now 800 ESOL students. If you're looking at 2021-22, that number reflects students that have come to the program or signed up. They're not necessarily all in 2 of our adult schools because we have satellite programs. We also have online programs that many of them attend, and some of them are in our programs that we have in probationary settings and in our jail settings. On average, 65% of the students that enroll into our adult programs will attend less than 225 hours. Now, some of that is a successful outcome. Some of that is our students just leaving the program. Additionally, 7 to 10% will sign up and not attend. So that number does not reflect students sitting in classrooms at our schools. Our plan is to relocate our adult school programs to the campuses of our 2 technical colleges. The assistant principals will continue to oversee their programs while reporting directly to the director of the technical college. They will also be changed from assistant principals to assistant directors. This will provide continuity for students to continue their education through the IET initiative. It'll allow us to share resources and make our programs financially slimmer. And it'll create a unified effort with Polk County adults, providing opportunities to complete their degree, certificate, or industry certification. Additionally, we will move the ratio from 18-to-1 to 25-to-1. Again, that 18-to-1 is not an imposed number by the state. That was a number that we imposed on ourselves at some point a while back. Again, the average daily attendance for these adult students is under 50%. Yes, Ms. Cunningham.
Yes. Going up underneath your second bullet, you have DOE's IET initiative. Could you tell me what the IET stands for?
Yes, that is the integrated education for career and technical programs. So they want us to integrate career and technical skills with our GED and ESOL classes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, I apologize if I didn't make that clear earlier. The facilities plan. West Area Adult School, the school building would be turned over to Facilities, who would utilize it as a building to, for their maintenance activities. The portables that were on that campus would be moved to Travis Technical College for classroom and office space. East Area Adult School, the school building would be turned over to Real Academy of Auburndale. Auburndale High School, numbers are continuing to increase. I was just talking to Mr. Bruno the other day, and he feels like his numbers will go up at least another 300 next year. So that area continues to get bigger, and they need their space back. So Real is going to have to move somewhere. Additionally, if there is a concern in the Auburndale community that we will not be able to continue to provide some adult and ESOL services, part of the campus, 2 of the classrooms could be utilized as satellite classrooms so that we could continue to provide services for students who may have transportation issues or other issues that may keep them bound to the Auburndale area. Portables that are left there would be moved to Ridge Technical College for classroom and office space. What's not mentioned in here, because they really only use this as a home base, is East Area Adult School, the migrant farm workers' office is there. They had already reached out to me earlier this year about seeing if we could move them to this side of the county, as most of the students that they serve are on, or migrant farm workers that they serve, are on this side of this county. So I have been actively looking for office space for them in the Bartow, Mulberry, Lakeland area. This is the list of some of our current satellite sites. This is the personnel plan. I do want to say this is a base plan. We believe that there will be savings in the plan, but the teacher numbers could work up again. This is a plan that is still in development, but the numbers could work back up, but there will be definitely savings in the plan on personnel costs. Both of these programs are paid for out of workforce funding, and workforce funding can only be spent on CTE and adult ed programs. So putting these programs together where one person can be paid for and serve both programs, which we can't do that everywhere, will be very beneficial. The displaced positions that we'd be looking at for West Area Adult School would be the 2 custodians, the guardian, 4 adult ed teachers, a resource teacher, and 2 part-time clerical. For East Area Adult School, again, displaced positions, 2 clerical, a para, teacher, 3 adult ed teachers, a resource teacher, and a part-time clerical. The guardian is not represented on there because the guardian will maintain that position, hopefully, when Real Academy moves over. These are our proposed next steps. Is develop a facilities move plan. I've had some very brief meetings with Ms. Usher, so we've kind of kicked that off, but we haven't worked out every detail. We have already spoken with the staff about the plan today. And in February and March, we will spend our time making sure we identify the staff that will be displaced. We will develop new marketing material to let people know about the move and get people oriented to going to the technical colleges for their adult education needs. During the summer, we will implement the move, and in August, we would have our adult ed staff report to their new campus. That is our adult education proposal. Ms. Miller, you have a question?
Ms. Miller.
I do, and I'm smiling because you spent a lot of time with me already on this, and I appreciate that. But this affects my district the most because it's 2 schools. We're talking about giving Auburndale more space, which they desperately need, and moving a school that's been in Auburndale since the early 80s. But I think The first topic I would like to speak on is the board needs to decide if adult education is a priority, because it doesn't make us a lot of money. There are other ways to get GEDs that cost a lot more money than we're providing something at a very low minimal cost to the public. Polk County is 15%, 15.8%, if you look at the poverty level, which is higher than the national rate, and I think employment and education is the way out of that. So we need to consider where we are, because I know statewide and nationwide, adult education is not a priority as much as it used to be, but we have to remember, I think, our demographics and who is with us to be able to provide opportunities. So I think that's one conversation we need to have. East area, which resides in Auburndale, has always had had more students than a West area. That person has also managed 16 off-site campuses or off-site locations where the West area has not. And it's just not been the history. We do have a new person in the West area school, and I'm hoping they can grow that program. So that's another conversation about, marketing and trying to grow. If we're going to try to grow these programs, we need to provide that kind of assistance. I never want to see displacement, but I also know we are going to work to find other opportunities for these people. I know a third conversation, I'm giving you lots of conversations, Mr. Cochran. A third conversation is how our other programs are managed. Both of these schools have ran with an assistant principal paid as an elementary AP, running programs with East area at 785 students and West at 549. In comparison to some of our Fresh Start and Polk grads who have multiple administrators, well, Polk grad has one, but Fresh Start has 147 students with 2 administrators. So I think we really need to start looking at equity and how we're, treating our administrative staff. But I do see the purpose of this, of trying to connect to certifications. I just want to make sure that when we're doing that, we have expectations that these programs will grow, or we'll make the decision that they're not going to grow, and we put our resources in another direction. I want them to feel supported, but I expect West area to have more opportunities. I mean, in North Lakeland, we've never been able to provide, we need more opportunities in that north side, I think, especially up in the Lake Gibson, the more rural areas. And I'm glad that we're going to keep a satellite campus in Auburndale, because I've already heard from the community, and they want to keep something there for the people who, if you're from Polk County, you realize from Auburndale to Ridge is a great distance for people who don't have transportation. So we want to be able to provide that. And I think if we can talk to the community and give them the plan of what we're doing, this will be easier for them to understand our expectations and for them to give feedback. So I'm hoping in both campuses we can provide a community day or a community evening to be able to answer questions, so people realize that this is moving the program forward, and we're going to grow the program to provide people not only their GED, but walk them into a certification program so they can continue their education. My one question is that I think out of the 100 questions I've already asked you is, we just invested in the East area becoming a GED testing site, which cannot be done in portables. So where would that be? Would we have to reinvest in creating a GED testing site at the technical schools, or will we keep that site and test GED where it's already been approved? Like, how does that work with the GED program?
Well, we would have to make adjustments to make a room that is appropriate for GED testing, but we do have space, regular buildings at the technical colleges where we should be able to build an appropriate testing room. I believe in the past, there had been times when GED testing did exist at the technical colleges. So there are spaces that we can transform into appropriate testing environment. There's a requirement that there is a windowed office, and that the computers have the appropriate secured link. All of these are items that are appropriate considerations, but we can definitely make them happen at the technical colleges.
I think that's important. I think mainly we need to have the discussion or a consensus of the board that this, adult school is where we want to see growth. I'm concerned with the follow-up, just to make sure that we're not even providing just GEDs, but we're giving them away to a job. GEDs you can get online, it's very expensive, and I'm not going to name the for-profit, not our charters, but there's some for-profit schools in Lakeland that will help them, but they're very expensive for people. So I do want to continue to offer this opportunity to to students. And even though some of these schools, and I work very closely with New Beginnings, are very successful, and I'm happy with the work they're doing, but their average student is very young. Our adult school average student is 30 plus. I mean, your student of the year, whoever that gentleman was 70 or 65 and returned back to get his GED. And I think that's important that we still offer those opportunities.
We will. And I'm glad that you brought up the fact that we want to grow our adult ed programs. Today's plan is not the obituary for Polk County Public adult schools. Today is a suggestion of a new beginning, a reinvigoration, reacting to the times, the changes that are going on, and reacting to state mandates, but moving them in a review of other districts' IET programs. They're doing things tied to automotive, to medical. These are things that I cannot do at the adult schools as they currently exist. If I take them and put them at the technical colleges, a student then can spend part of their time in their class with their GED or ESOL teacher, and they can walk down the hall and go spend time in the medical assisting class or in the automotive class. This is going to be a great opportunity, I think, for Polk County's adult programs, adult students.
I don't want to add, I want to reinforce that comment, Steve, because I think that's important. You know, Ms. Miller spoke about our investment. I think this is a reflection of our continued commitment here. And again, I'll say it for the third time today, this will become strategic plan goals under academic outcomes as well as whole child, because this is a holistic approach for adult learning and putting them and giving them an opportunity not only to earn a GED, and for many of our students, they are ESOL students or ELL students, new immigrants, and they're learning the language here. But I think what I like most about the proposal is the alignment to career and tech ed. That we're moving beyond just simply providing someone a GED, saying go out and attain a minimum wage position versus a highly skilled trades position, which could really change their lives and that of their families. And I think that's an important thing that has to continue to be highlighted here, is that by putting them in the same facility, we do get better supports for that. But, and you brought up a point a moment ago, and I committed to the board I would bring it back in January, which are some recommendations, as you pointed out, for some of those administrative positions. There are approximately 15 positions that I will bring, and I'll address those here in a moment, at the next January meeting for consideration for approval in February. Because we do have, as we talked about Bartow IB, we talked about Harrison, we talked about Summerlin, we talked about East and West area adult learning, we've talked about our teen pregnancy programs. I mean, there are people whose job descriptions really have to be and have been reevaluated to make a decision as to how do we elevate them to their next level, which would be more appropriate considering what they supervise and what they support. So it's a very valid point, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity to reinforce the concept of we're not just focusing on GED. Our commitment is both GED, but more importantly, how do we segue and provide our GED participants access to high-wage trades and opportunities at our vocational trade schools. And it's a great opportunity to have them in the same building versus asking them to commute to one and then commute to the other. So I think that becomes our marketing opportunity.
And we've committed to having those conversations. You'll probably get a bigger turnout in the East area just because of how committed that community has been in supporting that school and the 16 satellite campuses. I think if they understand that that's the goal, they'll be in support of the changes that'll happen. And I know Auburndale needs the room. I think they have 100 in the Real Academy right now, so you're going to free up taking 100 students over to that other facility, which will allow them to continue to keep growing in that Auburndale High School.
I have Ms. Fortney, then Ms. Cunningham, then Ms. Wyatt.
Yeah, Mr. Cochran, thank you for taking my call the other day when I asked a ton of questions. But I want to go back to something I talked to you about well before this, when I visited the HVAC shop right there at Travis. And, you know, a possible internship program for our students that are at the technical colleges with us. Can you maybe give us a little insight on how that's moving along? Because I think it goes in on this a little bit.
That is a great question. We actually looked at trying to start that last year, but COVID kind of restricted some of the opportunities and the student interest. We will be looking at that again this year. That a program had been tried in the past, where we did have students from the technical college right along with some of our maintenance workers. Unfortunately, I don't think it was very well planned, so there wasn't a lot of preparation for the maintenance workers as to what their responsibility was. I think that we can improve on that in the future by being more selective about who we put our students with, and also providing some training as to how to work with a possible intern. But definitely, that is a program that we'd like to continue to develop. And I know Ms. Usher can testify that there are unfortunately many openings in our maintenance department, and we provide the skills at our technical colleges that they will need to have our job. So we should be looking at the very minimum, giving these students an experience to what we do in the Polk County school system, possibly being able to retain them for future jobs.
I just have a follow-up, because I'm pretty sure we have a couple of instructors at our technical college that actually are part of our staff, support staff.
That is correct.
Right.
Unfortunately, we've hired some of their best workers out to be great instructors, but they have to come from somewhere to share the knowledge. So it's like planting a seed. You want it to grow. So
Gotcha. Thank you.
thank you.
Ms. Cunningham.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to you and your team. I fully, wholeheartedly support your transformative plan for the next few years. I think that it's very important that we continue to educate our adults and to do it in such a manner whereby they see opportunities beyond just getting the GED. When you look at the European model for education and others around the globe, you will see that young people and adults continue to have opportunities to gain the necessary skills for them to become part of our society where they can work a decent wage and earn a decent living to support their family. So to me, looking at it from a 30,000 foot, we are going to be providing not only the basic steps of the GED, but we are going to be, as Superintendent Hyde said, look down the hallway, what are some other opportunities there to truly gain skills that that individual can do to completely change and transform, if you will, their lives. I understand that there's, a lot of stuff that has to go into this, but the overarching takeaway is that we are in the education business, and we are continuing to do that. And I believe within a few years after this is implemented, we're going to be able to transform lives one at a time, but at each of those places, so that those students coming out can earn a living wage rather than minimum wage and provide for their families. And as we all know, it's the cycle of life. If I see my dad, or my mom or my grandparent go and do this and they see the changes, all of a sudden everybody in the family is affected. The children, the brothers, the sisters, aunts, uncles, it becomes life-changing for an entire family. So I support this. I know it's going to take time to do it and to do it properly, because we do have all these things that you have presented, including folks that will be displaced. But I do believe that in the long run, this is an awesome decision going forward. So thank you so much for taking the time to explore this, as difficult as it might be. Thank you.
Had Ms. Wyatt, then Ms. Fields. Ms. Wyatt, do you still have a question?
Yes, I have several. Is this something that's going to be coming to the board for approval?
It is.
Okay. I'm concerned by the lack of data in some of this. You spoke about the numbers, which I believe that the adult schools are on a rolling enrollment. So
Yes,
they
ma'am.
still have students enrolling. So while it looks like there's a slight dip for 21, 22, I'm assuming this doesn't capture any of the spring numbers because we'll continue to enroll students through
We will continue to
June.
enroll students, that is correct.
So historically, what percentage of students typically are enrolled in this after Christmas? Do you know?
I would say that it's not as busy as in the spring, but I
Okay.
don't have that exact number.
Okay, if we could get those numbers, just to get, looking at the numbers, after a dip during COVID and seeing that we're already, it looks like surpassed on the ESOL enrollments for 21, 22 in a new year, seems pretty good, considering we still have 6 months left to enroll. So I'd be interested to see what we anticipate based on historical data, what percentage typically enrolls after Christmas.
And again, I want to point out, these do not directly translate to students on campus. This includes the satellite sites. It includes a well-attended audience at our jail schools and our probationary programs. I have been on campus and noted this year before Omicron has come on. I've been on campus when there have been 56 students, and I have been on campus when there have been less than 20.
I'm smiling because my next question was, do we have a breakdown of where these students are? Because I know you mentioned that they're on different campuses, but it's hard to see the full picture
Yeah.
when, if they're on 16 different campuses, is there one or two that they're really located at? Or what does the Auburndale sites actually see? So if we could get those numbers. Sorry, I'm checking them off as I go. As far as the educational personnel planning, it looks like we're eliminating the adult education teachers for both sites. What's the rationale behind just eliminating those
There
positions?
are still adult education teachers at each site. We're just made some additional cuts.
Okay, so they won't be moving?
It should be for GED programs. Right now, we have proposed 2 and 3 ESOL.
So what are the displaced adult ed positions? There's 3 for one and 4 for the other. 4 for West area and 3 for East area.
Well,
They're classified as adult ed.
I'm sorry, I didn't break those out into whether they were ESOL or GED, but I can get that for you.
Okay, thank you. Is that because they are, that we think numbers are dwindling? Is that why, or is it just because we're collapsing classes and increasing the number of students in each class?
Well, the numbers are dwindling. Again, an example, across one of my visits, I found no more than 4 students in our GED classes. So that was the day I was out there, and there were less than 20. So we had the artificial number that we put up there, 18, and then, they're adults. They don't come every day. They have other responsibilities and jobs and children, and some of them will take the GED book and study some more at home and only come in when they have a question. So that keeps the number down. If we increase the class number to 25, which is the same number that we have at our high schools, then attendance in the classroom should at least be up to 12 to 15.
Gotcha. And that makes total sense. I'm just concerned if that's the reason for cutting positions, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that our numbers are going to increase again as we see spring semester. And if we're cutting units with the same number of students as last year, that's concerning to me.
Steve, if you'll pull the historical data on what enrollment looks like first semester and second semester for the past few years, I'd appreciate it.
Will do.
Thank you.
It shows, sorry, I still have, I've got 3 more. The additional portables at Travis and Ridge, are those additional portables? I know you said they're moving for West area?
Yeah, we would move them off of the property to be additional portables that we may need for the adult programs.
Okay, and then at Ridge, it would be bringing in additional portables?
The same, yes.
Okay, and that cost, I know it's a one-time cost, but I'm assuming that's not included?
No,
And
that's
that's
correct. That's
proposal?
definitely not included.
Okay. I think you said earlier that the Real Academy has 100 students, is that?
That's
Ms. Miller maybe said that.
I don't have the exact number, but that's about the number that they
Okay.
have.
And then as far as, I know that they'll still need a guardian, are there any other positions that they would have to bring with them that after, if, you know, right now they're on Auburndale's campus, so they obviously share
That's right.
Auburndale's guardian. Are there any other positions like that that we would
I
have to
don't
hire
project
additionally for
that they
Real
would
Academy?
need any other additional staff. They do have a secretary, they have some support staff, so they have somebody who can be up front at the front desk. I don't foresee them needing any additional staff when they move over there, other than the guardian.
Okay,
Now, and I do want to note that much like the other Real Academies, they don't have their own cafeteria. So at Real in Auburndale High School, obviously, they would get their food from the Auburndale High School cafeteria and bring it back to their classroom area. Dwight Smith gets their food from Crystal Lake Middle, and the Haines City, the one at East Side, gets their food from the East Side cafeteria, which is served in a portable there. So we will have to transport food over to Real in the same fashion that we do Crystal Lake Middle.
and I'm assuming that would be a recurring cost as well? So
That
if we
will
could
be,
get
that would be a recurring cost to transport that food there.
data, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
As far as Ridge Technical, I know we've historically had some issues with the accessibility because of its location. My understanding is they did finally get a bus stop out there. Have we seen, how has that increased numbers at Ridge Technical?
I don't have the information about whether the bus stop increased numbers or not.
Okay, because my biggest concern with the east side is that the accessibility of it. Ridge has historically not had great accessibility because it is located in the middle of cow pastures. There is a racetrack out there now, but it's really in the middle of nowhere and not somewhere that our students can get to easily. And there's not a true community to support and rally around it like Auburndale has. I know that Auburndale, being located in Auburndale, it's a pride for Auburndale to have it there. And there's a lot of unintended consequences with moving things out of a community, especially with not getting the community support first. So I do have concerns about what resources will go with moving it out of Auburndale. I know their Rotary sponsors several scholarship programs and things like that specifically for East Area adults. So I want to make sure that we're looking at that and addressing that as this is being approached. I completely understand and think that we need to make sure that we're getting these adult students' technical skills. I just want to make sure that we're not pulling out of Auburndale completely. I'm thrilled that it would then be in my District 4 instead of Lisa's, because I've had that envy for a little while, but I do have concerns with moving it out of Auburndale, which has been fairly accessible, into an area that's not quite as accessible historically.
Well, we think that we can still maintain very strong ties to the Auburndale community. The administrator that's at East Area Adult School is very active in the Rotary, and I support that. And she can remain active in the Rotary at Auburndale because that's the side of the county that she will be serving. So won't just be serving the Ridge area or Haines City or Winter Haven. She's serving that whole side of the county. So we want her to maintain those strong ties. Again, we will maintain an adult ed presence for those with limited transportation there at Auburndale or in the Auburndale area, as we do in a number of communities. You know, I think that we can satisfy the need of the Auburndale community for adult education, but also better serve our students by getting them to the place where we can provide more educational opportunities for them.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing more of the data that Superintendent Hyde has indicated.
Ms.
we'll
Fields?
get.
I think this is a great opportunity, as Mr. Hyde said, as it relates to the GED students being able to look beyond just getting a GED diploma, but going to get some additional skills. So I think the way that we market this is going to be very important and very critical. I am interested in knowing what was the response from the staff. You said that you've already told the staff what's being planned. What was their response?
Well, obviously, they're disappointed that there is a move. I mean, people take ownership and pride in their school, and they should. And I would have been disappointed if they weren't disappointed. And it affects me too. I don't like making a decision that will impact some people and be disruptive. I've talked with Brian Warren. We feel very confident that anybody that is displaced will be placed because we have a number of job openings. However, I know that that's still disruptive to people. But this decision is not one that was just made in haste. There have been a lot of conversations. I've monitored the numbers. I go out to the schools. Although I see great enrollment numbers, the completion level is not exactly where we would like it at, nor is the attendance at the school. You know, when we talk about the equity of the positions, you know, all of the administrators in the multiple pathways have different jobs and different responsibilities and different types of students. You know, Real Academy may only have 100 students, but that's 100 students that 80% of them come every day. And they've got to be taken off a bus, and they have to be fed, and they have many more discipline issues than our adult programs. So they have you know, they have a big responsibility too. Our adult school administrators have a huge responsibility too, because they are the focal point for serving our adults throughout the county. So they have to think on a very big scale about how we're going to be able to provide services. But you know, I think it's important to mention that our adult programs are responsible for outreaching and trying to bring these students in. However, the need is not as big as it has been in the past. So with those shrinking numbers, we're taking up a building where we're serving approximately 50 or 60 students a day, where we could be doing that in a smaller footprint and maximizing our resources at our technical colleges and opening up better opportunities for our students.
And I agree with you 100% on that. I think it's just the way that we market it, like Mr. Hyde said a few minutes ago. My other concern, and this is to Mr. Hyde, is I want to make sure that we don't displace our staff, that we find a place for them.
Yes, ma'am.
Because they already are being moved from their comfort zone. And then to be wondering whether or not they're going to have employment, to me, is an added layer of stress that they don't need, not right now. So I really would hope and pray that we can find placement for all of our staff.
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that, Ms. Field. It's a very valid point, and Ms. Miller addressed that as well. And I think that's really where Ms. Wyatt was going when she asked the question about were these satellite locations or from the East or West Center site as it stands. So two things. Number one, these are projected numbers. Every year our FTE changes. So if we can market this aggressively second half of the year, this will come back to the board for a final recommendation and approval. If the board agrees to move forward with the proposal, even with modifications, then we would begin an aggressive marketing campaign. And I actually think we could see a significant increase in the number of students participating. Ms. Wyatt addressed the question, well, we don't have a lot of participation in that segment because there hasn't really been transportation, and we all know that that community is growing exponentially, so it will grow around that program. But it might be interesting to see, whereas we may see a drop-off in actual Auburndale participants, will we see a significant increase in those coming from the area surrounding Ridge Community High? And because maybe they weren't able to participate because geographic location. We've talked about, how do we replicate programs and expand programs in a meaningful way to give everyone an opportunity so that transportation doesn't become the barrier. So you've given us some good questions to look at. But the second part, Ms. Fields, is, we currently continue to have a staffing shortage in all areas. And so I would imagine that any staff member who finds themselves displaced would have more than ample opportunities to have their choice of other reassignments as needed.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Miller.
I appreciate that you just mentioned the effects to Auburndale, and that we're going to keep a satellite room or 2 rooms there, and also maintain, we just dedicated not too long ago that the building to the Hammers, Mr. and Mrs. Hammer, who were lifelong volunteers there. So I think still associating a satellite campus there is appropriate for just what the superintendent said, that we don't want to lose what's happening in Auburndale. I know the city has actually paid to have some of the people that work for them go get their GED so they can give them a raise and give them a different opportunity or higher in their job. So I think it's important to keep the satellite campus there. But we also need to look at adult education differently than K-12. Adult education happens at night. The East area runs the program out of the jail. So I don't know that we would see the same attendance-wise as if you were talking about K-12 and walking into a room. And I realize the Real Academy needs 4 administrators, or maybe more than 1, because of the discipline and all the other things. But we have 1 administrator on the east side who writes grants and does things well above, actually, I guess she's the adult school administrator of the state or something. So I think we need to make sure that we recognize the talent we do have to grow the program. And if it's rebranding, is that going to be site-based? Because it used to be marketing at the site level, then they said everything goes back to the district. Who is responsible for the rebranding and marketing? We need to make that very clear and invest in that, which probably everything should run through the district. But I don't know if that's going to be based on site personnel or district personnel. I would be interested in the cost of transferring 100 meals every day. Is it breakfast and lunch or just lunch? I don't know how that works.
I think it's breakfast and lunch.
Okay, and that's something that your department pays for that academy? Because I think that will grow as well, moving it into that building. So it has facilities there. It has some meeting rooms there. That if we have to put in a staff, there possibly is room to do that, I would think.
Are you talking about processing our own food there? Cooking our
Yes,
own
some
food?
kind of,
I don't think that there is a small kitchenette.
okay.
And I think they've moved out a lot of that. As a matter of fact, where you come into the main office and then there's the desk up front and then those offices are in the back, that used to be all the cafeteria.
Correct.
Okay,
Or at least the preparation area.
okay.
However, it will have certain advantages in that it has plenty of power, that we'll be able to hook up warmers and coolers, depending on whatever we're serving, right there. And also, the Hamer Auditorium Room will be a perfect place for their lunches.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the data that Ms.
So this will
Wyatt
come
will
back
present.
at the next meeting on workshop as well. We'll have all the updates for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to bring Brian Warren up, talk about TPG. Our contract is coming up for renewal. I know the board and others have received questions or concerns about how to support staff, so we have some updates for you there on some of the work being done. But at this time, Brian, it's yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to welcome the opportunity for us to be before you today. Joining me momentarily will be David Voss. He is going to be walking you through a summary and kind of an update of our program and our relationship with our teachers with TPG. Joining him remotely, and I think they're working on trying to bring in Ms. Sujata so she can join us by Zoom to also listen and participate in our presentation today. She is another one of the key folks that we work with in relation to the TPG program. I also want to make everyone aware that we have some other folks with us that are relative to the support of the TPG program. We have Principal Hudson behind us that houses, I believe it's like 11 of the TPG teachers at her site. And also joining us today is Director Cheryl Hill that offers support, and also teacher engagement leader Jessica Solano. So now with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Voss, and he will begin his presentation relative to the summary and the update of our relationship with TPG and the teachers in Polk County.
Well, thanks a lot. So yeah, it's David Voss. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you, both at the FSBA conference as well as at that wonderful reception that we had here in Polk County. I want to thank the staff, Dr. Hudson, the folks behind me, for the incredible job they have done in being our partner on this program. Meeting both the challenges as well as the successes, we still have a national teacher shortage. It's just a reality. And there will be a contract coming before you that mostly just increases the cap on the number of teachers that you can have here in Polk County. And it doesn't require a certain amount, it just increases the cap. It gives the principals and others the option to hire more of our teachers. Now, I like the reverse order. Questions always come at the end. We can talk for 5 minutes or 5 hours about cultural exchange program. And so I know time is of the essence. You like things to be short and brief. So if you could just give me a few of the top of mind things that you have on your mind, including time limit, then Sujata, who's very adept at doing this, can kind of tweak and adjust her presentation to address those concerns. What might be fresh on your mind for the cultural exchange program?
I know Ms. Fortney had her hand up, and I saw Ms. Fields out of the corner of my eye.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi.
I have the same things that I bent your ear about in Tampa. We have thank goodness we had some partnerships with our churches and amazing community members, and of course staff at these individual schools. I'd like to know how we can make it prior to arrival, exactly what I was asking about, to have more of a foothold on how we can support our international teachers with housing, household items, transportation, those things. And
We
then
will
I'll
address
shut up.
that for sure.
Ms. Fields?
That was basically mine. How can
Same
we
one,
better
housing.
support? I mean, we're bringing these teachers over, and my understanding is that they basically have a suitcase and that's about it. And so what can we do to ensure that they have a quality of life so they can be the best that they can be for our students and for our community?
Housing is a huge national challenge as well as here in Polk County, and we're going to address that for
Ms.
sure.
Cunningham?
In addition to those, not only the support coming over and getting settled and finding that initial place to live and so forth, but giving them names of community leaders and folks that they can reach out to for help as the time ensues, versus, boom, you're here, you're done, go to work and zip it. I mean, that's basically what they've been told. So I think we need to do more if we're going to continue this type of contract.
We'll clarify what we've done and what we need to do in the future.
Ms. Miller?
I've asked for the contract with your group, so I need Jason or someone to forward that. I haven't received it for what we've paid for services. I think the expectation of what you were going to provide was lost, so maybe you're going to explain that to us. Ms. Hudson did an amazing job with her students, but we have administrators coming out to provide services, even transportation. You know, when I can't get teachers to school because they have to take Ubers, who decided where they would live in comparison to the schools? Right. You know, we've put people in places that I visited that I would not leave my dog. And that's the honest to God truth. And so we need to talk about whose responsibility it is for housing. If it's not yours, is it ours, and what the timeline is for that? So housing and transportation is an issue, and cost is an issue for me, so I need to see the contract.
I believe if you go back to the board docs, you should be able to find where we approved that this summer, and all the contact costs are in there. But I'll see, Mr. Pitts is out for today, but Ms. Jenkins will look for that and send that to you as well.
Any others? Yeah.
Similar to my colleagues, the housing and transportation, specifically how we're communicating with them on the front end. Many communities have many more options for public transportation than Polk does currently, and it's much more accessible in other communities. So across the world, wherever they're coming from, living 3 miles away may not be a big deal if you can hop on a subway or a metro or a bus or something like that, but it's a very different culture in Polk County as far as being able to get around. So making sure that we're explaining that to them as they're determining where they're living and make sure they're thinking about how to get around.
Absolutely. I think there were some things done that you need to be made aware of, and also some things that we need to do. So Sujata, if you want to go ahead and present, I think you have a clear understanding of what this board is interested in. Go ahead and switch to the Zoom meeting, and I think she's going to share her screen, and we'll, of course, answer additional questions along the way. Beaming her in from New York. I hope. She's been standing by for 2 hours, so I think hopefully now she can. I hope Zoom didn't time us out. It's on this hard drive as a backup. If you can get to it. What happened?
It's showing that she's turned her camera off. She's still connected.
Yeah, you know, it always works when you try it ahead of time, which it did just fine. All right. She said she can't hear anything too. All right. Yeah, I've got you on my speaker on cell. They said that your camera is turned off?
Yeah, I still can't hear anything. I just turned my camera on, but I was waiting.
Oh, there you are. There you are. You just showed up. Now you're on screen.
Hear anything though? You guys are on mute.
All right, I'm going to keep my phone on and will relay questions to you.
Okay. You want me to present?
You are muted though. Yes, go ahead and unmute.
I'm muted because I'm on the phone with you. If I unmute,
All right.
then you're going to hear me from both locations.
I will hang up. I will hang up and you can go through your presentation.
The problem is I can't hear you because you guys are muted.
We're muted.
All right, we'll unmute on both ends.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Hello.
There we are.
If anyone's talking, I can't hear you.
We can hear you now, so go
I
ahead and do
believe
the
you all are on
presentation.
mute.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yay.
Perfect. Okay.
Please go ahead and proceed. You're live.
Sure. Did you already do the introduction?
Yeah, we did the introductions, and clearly there is a focus on the housing and transportation needs here.
Sure. Okay. And how much time do we have?
Let's be as brief and as concise as we can, as we're already behind our agenda timeline.
Sure. David, should I do the shorter version of the presentation?
Yes, try to keep it within 15 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Give me 1 second. I'll share this one instead. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you today, but you have David, who I think is a better alternative. So I'm glad you guys were able to meet with him, and I'm glad he's able to be there to connect with you in person. Really appreciate you all taking the time to walk through the program, as well as all of the support that these teachers have had in Polk County thus far. So I'm going to walk through this fairly quickly, just understanding the time limitations. Feel free to stop me at any point if it would be helpful to address any questions. Otherwise, we can always do them at the end. But I am going to move a little bit quickly and I'm happy to dig into anything further if that would be helpful. So the basic overview of the program is that we, TPG, provide highly qualified, Florida DOE certified, English-speaking international educators, and we focus specifically on high-need subject areas.
Sujata, if you could switch to presentation mode.
I am in presentation mode.
We're not seeing that. Okay, go ahead.
Should I?
You're still on slide 1, the title slide.
Maybe it got frozen on your end, because I'm seeing slide 2 on my end.
So I'm actually going to ask us to redirect the presentation at this time. The board received a comprehensive presentation during the summer when we renewed or contracted as it relates to how many staff we would secure and the process for that. I would ask us to redirect today's presentation to specifically address the questions that the board has requested more information on. And let's start with, I think the best starting place would be Ms. Miller's question as to whose responsibility is it that when an employee is secured and brought here to Polk County to assist them with housing and transportation? What's the process? What do you provide? Where's there potentially a gap that we need to consider filling, whether it's directly by the school district or in partnership with many of our wraparound support service groups here in the community? So if we could start with answering that question, and then we'll go through the list of questions the board asked before.
Sure. David, if you guys can't see my screen, would it make sense for you to present the slides that we had put together on housing? And I can speak to them?
No, not necessary, and we'll
Okay.
struggle with that too. But you can put your slide back on and go right to that slide which has our responsibilities and their responsibilities, and they can see that, and you
Thank
can
you.
walk them through that.
Thank you.
Sure, I am doing that, so I think for some reason the thing got frozen on your end, because that's what I have up on my screen. So I think you guys aren't seeing what I have on my screen, which is fine, I can just speak to it. But I don't think the slides are working. Okay, so to take a step back, when the teachers are selected, we partner with them to help them with housing, but ultimately it is their decision to finalize their housing. And the reason for that is obviously these are all professionals who are adults who have their own family considerations as well as budget considerations to keep in mind when they are choosing their housing. If we finalize housing on behalf of someone without them making an active decision and making the final choice as to where they want to live, then frequently there are disappointments and there are people who feel frustrated and feel like they don't have their final say over where they're living. So it is, they are making a full salary and they are paying the rent. And so it is extremely important that when they make a final decision about where they want to live, that is their decision. So what we will do is that we will connect them with landlords in the area who we have been in touch with, apartment complexes in the area that we have been in touch with, and give them options that are available. But fundamentally, they are signing the lease, they are paying the rent, and it is their responsibility to finalize housing. This year was obviously an unprecedented year, and I think that's something that we've seen across the board. It is not specific to exchange teachers. It is not specific to Polk County. It's something that we've seen nationwide and, was a result of supply chain crises and COVID, as well as other issues that were going on in the world this year. So something that is always a little bit tricky in terms of finding people housing when they're coming from other parts of the world was extremely exacerbated this year just because of, the confluence of events that occurred with COVID and the supply chain and all of that. So I think, it was particularly complicated this year. What ended up happening was that many of the teachers ended up in extended stay housing, which thankfully there are a large number of affordable areas to stay across Polk County in terms of extended stay hotels and things like that. And then they had to spend a little bit more time looking for housing, and we spent a lot more time looking with them for housing after they arrived here in the United States. One thing that definitely helps with housing is knowing as early as possible who is coming and where they're going to be placed. So I think in terms of the timeline this year, the teachers weren't even interviews until July, and then we typically didn't find out where they were going to be placed until the end of July or early August. And so there was very little time before the start of school to figure out that specific area and where they could potentially live. I think one of the major learnings from both sides this year was to front load that time frame as much as possible so that the teachers will be interviewed as early as possible. We'll know where they're going, they will know where they're going, and we'll be able to work with them on housing with a much earlier time frame on that front.
You are back on screen. Maybe a little bit more on the division of responsibilities for housing and transportation issues and local support.
Sure. So as I said, it's the teacher's final decision to make sure that they are comfortable with the housing opportunity that they decided to go for and that they've chosen. Many of them do prefer to see the housing in person before they finalize it, and that obviously does, extend the time frame if they want to get here first, see the housing, and then finalize it. We do try and take their individual priorities into consideration, but fundamentally, per their contract, they are required to secure and pay for their housing. We provide as many options as we can in terms of what options are available in the area. But fundamentally, it is the teacher's responsibility to finalize their housing. We built a lot of really great relationships across the district this year, and we'll continue to leverage those relationships. Obviously, if there are local relationships that the board has, or anyone at the district level, or even anyone at the school level, we are always open to receiving that information and building partnerships wherever available.
Didn't we recently develop a chart or a graph of who's responsible for which things? I believe you have a slide on that, and then they also drafted something here in Polk County that would clarify different roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, I don't think that we have the responsibilities as a slide, but that is something that, as a takeaway and a lesson learned that Cheryl and I took away from this year. And we put together a very clear responsibilities document. The PCPS team and our team worked together on that and put together a clear responsibilities document in terms of who handles each responsibility. When it comes to housing, the responsibility on our end, as we see it, is to provide as many options as possible to the exchange visitors and help them navigate the area and understand where things are, what options might be available so that they can then make a choice, and then fundamentally their decision to make that final choice.
The other challenge that was really brought up was transportation, particularly in Polk County, where public transportation isn't always available to people. What are some of the options in your experiences that we can provide and help them with, whether it's car loans or whatever, and trying to make this smoother next year?
Absolutely. So one thing, the thing that we always encourage the teachers to do as much as possible is to build relationships and carpool with others from their school. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one is that almost every single teacher comes from a country where they drive on the other side of the road than we do in the United States. And so we've found that if they start driving immediately, there are a lot of accidents. And, that is not something that we want to happen. We definitely, their safety is our priority. And so making sure that they are comfortable with the rules of the road and just a little bit more familiar with what it's like to drive on the other side of the road is important before they actually get into a car and begin driving. The second reason for carpooling is that it does provide an informal mentorship type of relationship that we find is very, very helpful for the teachers when they first arrive here. A lot of the times they'll have a department head, an AP, a principal, and maybe a formal mentor through the district, a formal mentor through our program. But sometimes they feel nervous to ask basic questions, questions that they feel like are too simple or that they feel embarrassed to ask for someone who is a formal mentor or formal supervisor of theirs. So a lot of the times that informal relationship that they build while they're in the car allows them to ask some of those questions that they might feel a little bit less comfortable asking in the context of a school or their formal exchange program. And then lastly, it allows them to familiarize themselves a little bit with the area before they settle down, save money, and buy a car. We do have relationships with car dealers in Polk County specifically that we've been building over the years, and that some of our teachers have actually gotten cars in Polk County from dealerships that we've put them in touch with. We try and be agnostic with regards to the dealership and not push them in one direction or another. Fundamentally, it should be their decision, where they decide to ultimately get a car. Again, this year with COVID and supply chain shortages, I think there has been news that all of us have read almost every single day about the crisis in cars this year and how expensive they have gotten and how limited they are, how limited the availability is. And so that has definitely been a challenge. And it's been a challenge not only in Polk County, and again, not only for the exchange teachers, but nationwide and everywhere that we work and everywhere that, new teachers are moving or anyone is really moving and needing to purchase a car or get something, that they didn't have before. And so putting them in touch with the dealerships, but really also making sure that they're in a place where they are comfortable before they decide to make that purchase is also important. We've been working with the PCPS team, with the teacher engagement team, and they put us in touch with an organization that does carpooling in a more formal manner or fashion. And so that's something that we're looking at implementing for next year. And we've been speaking to them over the course of the last couple of months to start to prepare and understand what that might look like. And then, we were also working with the PCPS team to try and see if school buses are something that we might be able to leverage, as well as the public bus system in terms of coordinating that around where some of those, especially the larger apartment complexes that we're working with, and some of those routes that a lot of the teachers are traveling. So those are all initiatives that we've been working with the teacher engagement team on.
One of the most profound lessons, and I think moving forward that we really have to keep in mind, is the start earlier issue. Just by getting them here earlier, by you hiring them earlier, us making them available earlier, we're dealing with human beings, not a system, who are moving from other countries to move here, and resolving some of those issues are just going to take more time. And I did want to shift before we finish and then take any other questions that you still have to the survey results, and then Dr. Hudson with a comment about what the principals think of the program. Can you cover that briefly, Sujata, and then turn it over to Dr. Hudson?
Absolutely. So, in response to some of the feedback we were getting, we did directly survey the principals to try and understand, what were the areas where they felt we could be doing a better job to support the teachers, and also how were the teachers performing in the schools, just so we could get some feedback from them and share that with you. 83% of the principals who we spoke to felt that their TPG teachers were performing better than average. And the teachers fill vacant positions, as well as, that they excel in content expertise. This is something that we've heard across districts, but it's great to hear in Polk County as well. The teachers are obviously experienced educators. They all have the equivalent of a bachelor's in education and at least 2 years of full-time teaching experience. So they do have very strong content knowledge, and it's something that, we're seeing in Polk County as well. In terms of areas of improvement and areas where they felt that they would like our help, teaching to standards was important, and that's something that we have incorporated with the teacher engagement team in a monthly webinar that we've started for the exchange teachers, as well as something that we've been working with the coaches on, and then classroom management. So, and that's what we are targeting our PD and the PD that we're working with the teacher engagement team on as well. And this here is a quote from Dr. Hudson, who I believe is there and available to speak to you. But she said to us, the TPG Cultural Exchange Program has been extremely beneficial. The teachers are professional, coachable, eager to learn, and assume new responsibilities. And Dr. Hudson, if you're there and want to say a few words, that would be great.
Thank you for the opportunity. I just want to say that we can't take all of the students in Polk County all around the world, but we can bring the world to the students in Polk County through this program. We have been a very beneficial opportunity for us at McLaughlin. I think that I was asked because we were one of the first schools to have 4 teachers with the TPG program. In addition to that, we currently have 14 teachers, which is the largest in one school population. That's honestly why it works, because we made sure that when we interview teachers, we tried to pair them with someone else from their country so that it wouldn't be one person isolated coming from Ghana, but 2 teachers coming from Ghana, 2 teachers from Jamaica, so on and so forth. So being able to pair them. Also, when we interviewed, some of these best practices I've shared with Ms. Hill, and we're looking to possibly work with TPG to share them with other principals onboarding, so teachers don't have to go, principals don't have to go through some of the pains that McLaughlin went through, but we can share some of the best practices. And in interviewing, one of the things that I asked all of the applicants that we considered was, do you know where we are? Lake Wales is not Miami. So they know Miami, they know Tampa, they know Orlando. So once they identified that they knew where we were, we asked them, do you have any family, any friends in this area? Most of them didn't, and we immediately became that social service agency to pair them with housing, transportation, et cetera. Building those relationships with the Housing Authority in Lake Wales to provide housing opportunities near the school that they could walk to work. We know that a lot of times that was not available in other schools, and then also this preference, as what was mentioned, and so we provided them with housing pamphlets from nearby housing apartments for them to consider for their choice, and let them know to move expeditiously on that. As far as transportation, Mr. Davis has been very helpful We have teachers who do catch a school bus in the morning. Not only does that help build relationships with them from individuals within their countries, but also with our students. How awesome is it for your science teacher to catch the bus with you in the mornings or in the afternoons? As well as we do provide those extra opportunities as staff to partner. I do want to thank the board for having us to have this opportunity, because I couldn't imagine operating a school with our population with 14 vacancies. So having the opportunity to bring international teachers in fills those vacancies. They're eager to learn. I wish I could have brought them here today, but as you know, we're dealing with shortages with COVID, so we want to keep as many teachers in place and be able to provide this. I do want to extend an opportunity for each and every one of you to visit our campus at any time to see teachers in action with the great work that they're doing through this program. But there are ways that we can work. Ms. Hill and I have talked about building an onboarding for any school who wants to move in this venture next year. We share some of the best practices so that we grow as a district. Thank you.
So I'll address a few things that the school district is doing and has been doing since we became aware of the issue. So Mr. Warren, Mr. Pitts, and others have been engaging several of our real estate groups. I have several meetings coming up with communities within, or developers within the Davenport community who feel like they have some solutions to offer. We've reached out to the state and the federal government to inquire as to the use of federal funds to offset housing costs. So for example, if one of our own teachers were to take someone in and allow them to use, to be basically, to co-share a house or an apartment, could we offset some of the housing costs associated with that? Citrus Connection is a group that we're engaging as well. Citrus Connection continues to expand all of their busing opportunities, and we will be able to provide a list of those and access through the web so that they can look from their present location to the site that they have to reach. If they choose not to purchase a car, then they have an affordable cost option. And as you know, we have a strong relationship with Citrus Connection, and we may be able to negotiate that they would be able to utilize that transportation around the clock, 7 days a week, at no cost to them. Finally, Mr. Rob Davis and his team have been looking at existing bus transportation routes to make a determination as to whether or not there's a route that passes in close proximity to one of their homes and would allow them to ride with students. We benefit twice. We basically get a built-in bus aid or bus monitor at the same time they get transportation to school. The transportation home becomes the questionable issue. A lot of our staff stay after school for planning, meetings, and other activities, and we don't run routes in the evening. So that's where Citrus Connection and other options come to the table. In my previous districts, we used to recruit heavily from Spain and from Puerto Rico, and we actually partnered very efficiently with our credit unions. And what the credit unions did was they worked with all new hires and gave them the option of a very low interest, low cost initial loan of up to $2,500 to $5,000, which would give them enough financial wherewithal that they could actually get first month last in security and utilities and those types of things to basically secure a location. I like, what was shared previously. Is there an opportunity for us to partner individuals so they can share a residence or an apartment to reduce costs? And as you know, and as was shared at the beginning, nationally, there's a teacher shortage. There's a national bus driver shortage. There's beginning to be a national shortage across the board in all employee classifications. And many school districts have looked at the options of affordable housing for their staff. And it is something that we're currently pursuing as well, not just for this group, but for all employees. And I know Miami-Dade and other districts in the state of Florida have kind of dabbled in this topic, but we've seen states like Arizona, we've seen California, where housing costs just absolutely skyrocket. In order to sustain a workforce, they have to do something a little bit more aggressive to address affordability of housing. So we are taking a multiple tier approach to what options we can provide. But I think going back to something Ms. Fields asked, even providing transportation and providing a residence doesn't mean they have a home. They have to have a bed. They have to have furniture. They have to have those things. And I think that's where some of our wraparound providers and partners can best be a resource for some of our staff. Much like our teacher store, is there an option for us to partner with Goodwill, with United Way, and with others to basically create almost a furniture or home goods version of that? But we do have some of that through Dr. Lutz's program, Castle, thank you. I want to say Toggle for some reason, but Tassel, which does provide homewares for many of our employees and our students' families as well. So there are opportunities, and we do have the resources. At this point, it's a matter of alignment. And so they've been working aggressively to help address those issues.
Thank you for that.
And Sujata, you also
Yeah.
provide a loan opportunity, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think, understanding some of those options that you're looking into is extremely helpful from our perspective as well. Just a couple of things to note that we do provide an interest-free loan to all of the teachers upon arrival, and nearly all of them take it. We provide a loan of up to $3,000 per teacher, which is interest-free, and then they pay that back over the course of about 10 paychecks. So they have 5 to 6 months to pay back the loan, and it has no interest attached to it. So that is what most of the teachers are using for security deposit and things like that. Even with the loan, it becomes difficult they're trying to support a lot of different things that they're doing immediately when they get here. So it typically is enough for a security deposit and really those initial things that they need to do to get settled. And in terms of apartment sharing, most of them do share apartments with each other when they first arrive. We encourage them to arrive by themselves at first without their families, really to give them time to get situated, get settled, and get their feet on the ground before they before they bring their families here and begin supporting their families as well. If they are able to show us that they have enough savings as well as a plan to bring their families, then they bring them when they come. But otherwise, they come here, they get themselves settled, and then they bring their families. And they do tend to share. One thing that is important to keep in mind is that there are cultural norms and cultural differences. So in America, we think of people having a 1-bedroom apartment, living by themselves and kind of commuting to work if they are single or if they don't have their families with them. Most of them are from countries where that's not really the way that they live. They are used to living with a lot of other people and living with people around. And that's kind of the familial way of living that they are comfortable with. And so a lot of the times they will choose not to live by themselves, or they will choose to actually share a bedroom with someone else. And that's an active choice that they're making because it's something that they feel more comfortable with. They don't like that feeling of being lonely or being alone in a bedroom or in an apartment, because that's not, how they live when they're in their home countries. And so that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, I completely agree that helping them with furniture and building these partnerships is extremely important. We do take them to Walmart for an air mattress immediately upon arrival so that they at least have something, and then they kind of build from there. They all have different priorities in terms of where they'd like to spend their money and how they would like to move forward. A lot of them will choose to spend as little as money as possible because they're actually sending that money back home to their home country. A lot of the time they're using that money to send their children to a better school or a private school in their home country. Maybe they're saving for their families to come here. And there are other different things that they are saving for that they're choosing to spend money on. So it's also just important to understand that sometimes if someone didn't buy a bed, it's not because they don't have enough money or they, haven't gotten there yet. It's maybe they're okay with the air mattress and they're comfortable and they would prefer to spend that money elsewhere. So it's just, a balance in terms of understanding kind of where they're coming from and what their priorities are while also continuing to support them, which is of course so important. And we are so grateful for all of the support that they have been given.
I saw Ms. Miller's hand up and then Ms. Fields.
I have a couple of questions. First, what do you charge them when they're recruited?
Nothing. We don't charge them any money.
So it just comes from the districts. Can you name you said you partnered with groups here already. Can you tell me who they were?
So Elsa on our team was ready earlier this morning, but she's in another meeting right now. She's the one who was on the ground in Polk County and working with the apartment complexes. So she's the one who's familiar with the different landlords and apartment complexes that she's been working with.
I would like more information from Elsa when that she's available. And
Sure.
you have someone here that it's an amazing principal who went over and beyond what any other principal knew to do, because a lot of our principals didn't know what to do. I walked into one apartment and heard from people who were locked into a lease that they did not understand, that was too expensive for where they were living, that teachers had to go negotiate with landlords for repairs. Like we're asking teachers to bring them on as peers, to mentor them in the classroom. But I think this time around, and it probably was what we need to plan, we were having teachers go way beyond. I mean, you have principals who took people home for the holidays, which I think is amazing, and that's, you know, and that's wonderful. But some of the principals have conveyed they did not know, and it might be the districts, it might be on our side, we need to do a better explanation. They did not realize the level of support that was needed, not only for classroom supports, but for life supports. And I know this year was different because COVID, they had to quarantine in hotels, and that expense was on them. And so I know that this year was different. You know, we had some differences, and we've had some personnel change, but there was a huge gap in information from our site staff. When I'm having principal secretaries use their own gas money to ride people from Lakeland to the east side just so they could get to work, like this, and it's not time to go back and put that on someone, but I'm trying to figure out how we prevent this from ever happening again.
Sure. One thing to address, we covered the COVID quarantine hotel stay for all of the teachers. So when they arrived here, TPG paid for them to stay in a hotel, and we paid for them to have transportation to the district from the hotel. Most of them landed in Orlando. So that was all covered by TPG. So if there was any, if there was any confusion there, that was something that we were covering. If they decided to stay in a hotel after the quarantine stay, then that was kind of, their responsibility after the quarantine stay. But in terms of making sure that they had a safe quarantine, that is something that TPG covered. In terms of, making sure that the communication with the principals is clearer for next year, as Dr. Hudson mentioned, one of the major things that we are planning to do this year is to do a full orientation for principals who are interested in hosting exchange teachers next year before they hire. So that would be something that we're partnering with Dr. Hudson as well as the teacher engagement team to set that up and be very clear with the principal in terms of what are they going to have when they come here, what are they not going to have, and where are the areas where it would be helpful to be able to partner with the principals and kind of work with them on all of that in terms of making sure that, we're very clear on all of that. We have reached out to every single principal and visited the majority of the schools with new teachers. And we have not heard anything in terms of, renegotiating leases, but if there's a specific follow-up that we can do, we are in touch with the teachers on a regular basis and encourage them to come to us with any issues or questions that they have. If there are specific issues that are outstanding at this point, obviously, in terms of what has already been completed, it's hard to go back, as you said. But if there's anything that we can do better moving forward, we are absolutely here and available. And, this is why we want to have this conversation with you to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Ms.
Thank you.
Fields? Sorry.
I want to be very mindful what I say. But it's very, very troubling to me that someone from another country would come to our city, our county, with very little and not have the resources that they need to just have a viable, decent life. And you said they're humans. You're absolutely right. And I believe that we should all abide by the golden rule. You do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Would I want to come from another country with a suitcase and nothing else and just trying to finagle my way around? No, I would not. We have got to do a better job this go around. And thank you, Superintendent Hyde, for what you said is in place. And thanks to all the employees that have gone above and beyond, and people in the community as well. Hearst Chapel, I know, did some things in Winter Haven. And I want to commend the principals. And I'm not singling anybody out, but I worked directly with Dr. Hudson. And I know she was really scrambling, trying to find anything that she could so that their teachers could have what they need. So some of the answers that were given to me were excuses. I don't want excuses. I want to figure out how we can get the best resources for these teachers so that they can be successful, because if they're successful outside of the classroom, when they come into the classroom, they're going to be successful. They're not going to be worrying about where they're going to sleep, where they're going to lay their heads, what they're going to eat and all that. That should not be a concern. So I hear the presentation. I appreciate it. Some of the answers I think were just excuses, and I am not about excuses. I'm wanting to figure out how we can do a better job for the next group that comes over to help our students.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Fortney, and then Ms. Wyatt.
Yeah, I've been on this for a while now, and Dr. Hudson, thank you so much. I actually, at the Hearst Chapel, they had, talking about a home goods store, it was filled with everything from coffee makers to mattresses, bikes. So that onboarding and best practices you talk about, Dr. Hudson, I would love follow-up on that because it is valuable, your experiences. Who did you work with the responsibility document that you mentioned?
Cheryl and I worked on that together, and we can circulate it if that would be helpful.
Cheryl,
Hill.
Joe?
Hill.
Hill, oh, okay, all right. And the mentor program, I heard, who is in charge of that? Here in the district?
So we have an internal mentor program within TPG where we connect them with exchange teachers who are here already from their same country and their same subject area. I don't know if that was the program that you were referring to, though.
I heard the word mentor, and I was wondering if that's part of our onboarding process or, because I think that was part of the problem, to be quite honest. I mean, I had to take a paycheck from the district office to Auburndale High School for a kid, for a teacher, not, well, kid too, but, you know what I mean?
TPG has a mentoring program for like persons, but we also strongly urge the district to do what they would normally do for a new teacher, which is assign a mentor in the same school as well. And I think they've done that.
If I may.
Yeah.
Ms. Hill and I have discussed using some of the teachers at McLaughlin to actually mentor the onboarding teachers because they've been here
Okay.
longer. So
That's-
when we bring in new teachers next year, our teachers can help them with some of those challenges with classroom management, standard alignment, so that we can make sure that all students receive that equitable education opportunity.
Right, and I guess what I was, kind of what Ms. Miller was saying, if it hadn't have been for a few of our folks within the schools that didn't even know who they were when they showed up, like Ms. Fields was talking about, like all of a sudden they see or a community member sees somebody walking to church, that's how people found out. I'm just saying that. And not, you know, we want to improve, we want solutions. And because, you know, it is exactly what Dr. Hudson said. Basically, it is a good way to get our kids exposed to the global viewpoint without a field trip. And, you know, so I'm all for helping. Whatever you need, I'm on board.
Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. You mentioned that TPG was responsible for helping identify housing options. Are you working with anybody that is from Polk County that understands what our housing options are in Polk County, what different neighborhoods are like, how, you know, something may look like it's a mile away, but you have 15 lakes between here and there, so it's actually a 30-minute drive. Do we have anybody in the district or in Polk County that's helping you all identify places?
So Elsa, who works specifically with Polk County, lives in Orlando. She has been visiting Polk County since March when she joined our team. We literally had an orientation with the teachers where a good 10 minutes of that orientation was just Elsa on Google Maps showing them, like, let me give you an understanding of what does it mean, what do these different areas mean? Just because you're going to Polk and you're going to Polk does not mean that you're going to be anywhere near each other. Let's look at each of your schools. Let's understand where these are. Let's understand what these neighborhoods are. And we had all of them on Zoom in their home countries, watching us go through the map and kind of explain the different locations to them. All of them did attend that Zoom call live and were available. Both Elsa and myself were available to answer questions, and really just in terms of kind of the map and situating them. As soon as we knew that we were going to be bringing teachers in this year, Elsa started visiting Polk County starting in June and really just starting to drive around and understand what were some apartment complexes that might be available, who were some landlords that might be available, and things like that. The trick really came where we didn't know who was coming in and who was going where until much later on in the process. And so even if we had met landlords and identified apartments and things like that, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, it is what apartment is available when this person is actually arriving. And so giving them those resources and working with them on that is extremely important. But also, you know, to David's point, hiring early so that we know where they're going as early as possible and can really start making those connections as early as possible is extremely important. And I do absolutely understand the feedback in terms of, the goal here is not to have excuses. The goal is to say, what can we do better next time? And I think as it relates to finding housing and pairing people with housing, fundamentally, the earlier we know, the easier it will be to make sure that, we get secure apartments as early as possible that are ready for when they're actually here.
Thank you. And I had the opportunity to meet Elsa recently, and she's wonderful, so this is nothing against her, but you need somebody from Polk County working with her. Whether it's a contract or you can't explain Polk County to people. I know our superintendent recently was looking for housing in Polk County, that you can't explain the neighborhoods and what the areas are to someone who's not here all the time, who's not driving through some of these neighborhoods after dark. And just making sure that we're starting off by recommending good places to stay to some of our people, because it's, in hearing some of the stories, it's not so much, it's that they were given bad advice for some of them, which isn't fair to them. And I think that's something that we could easily remedy by having somebody local help with those recommendations.
Sure, and I think, to Superintendent Hyde's point, some of those local realtor connections might also be a good way to move forward with that, because they just have such a finger on the pulse in terms of housing specifically, different areas, and where they would recommend.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Jenkins, I'll ask you to come up as we transition. I'll go ahead and cover staffing updates. Thank you very much. I'll wrap up this topic a little bit because, it's important for us to address all of these questions and concerns and develop a more robust mechanism so that we can support the onboarding of these staff, because the reality of it is contracts and partnerships like this are not going away. We continue to see a long list of vacancies, and we've had a great deal of success thus far with these individuals when it comes to their instructional delivery and their ability to interact with our students and provide perspective and all of those things. So it's important and incumbent upon us to make sure that this program continues to thrive. It's something that this is not new to us this year, is my understanding. We had a similar contract previously, although not at the scale we're currently addressing. And I think that's why we're seeing more concerns rise to the forefront. So I will be more than happy to bring back to the board a more comprehensive support plan that outlines transportation, outlines mentorship, outlines, access to resources, but also developing an aggressive timeline so that, as you heard TPG talk about today, companies like theirs need to hire early so that we can begin the onboarding process and give people as much time and information as they need to make informed decisions. And we'll be there to support them along the way. I use that to segue into staffing very briefly, because there will be some recommendations for staffing changes that will come before the board at the next meeting that actually will help us best address this need. Teacher recruitment, teacher retention, and other areas. Ms. Miller talked about, the East Area School Assistant Principal and what she does, and the West Area Assistant Principal, what they do. And we've talked about those programs and the very disparate level of assignment for individuals within an organization. I'm proud of the fact that by the end of the month, all of our senior administrators will have completed a comprehensive review of every single job description that falls under their purview. Now, that's not just done in isolation from the employee. The employee is part of the dialogue. What's changed in your role? When was the last time we looked at your job description? What's changed? How many people do you supervise? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? And then we will make recommendations comprehensively, and it may take, depending on the scale of what has to change, it may take us a couple years to get there, but we will get there. And we do have very disparate systems. And I'm going to be honest, looking back at the history, we didn't create that. Nobody created the disparate levels of positions. We allowed it to happen over time. And I want to clarify what I mean by that. So when we talk about the fact that there was a principal assigned to Bartow, and we don't have a principal assigned to Cambridge, and we don't have a principal, and we have a principal assigned to Harrison, and a commandant for Summerlin, what I have found historically in speaking to others within the district was, when the schools were originally budgeted for those positions, they were budgeted equitably. We allowed the school levels to make changes in the position level so that they could be more responsive to what they felt their local needs were. The problem is it creates a perception over time that we're not equally funding all of those positions, and it creates disparity. And so we're finding more and more of that, and that's okay. We knew we had to review all of our job descriptions. Some of them I can't bring to you because they require, they're union-based employees, and so we'll have to sit down with PEA and walk through any changes that we're recommending or proposing or to discuss. But from that perspective, just know that comprehensively, there'll be a long list of some recommendations that I will bring to you to help address. Some will be for end of year, some will be now. About half of those will be requests to implement now. Others will be based off end of the year. I will assure you that everything is cost neutral. It'll either be completely paid for as a result of current cost savings that we have realized by consolidating positions, which was my promise previously, or they're fully grant funded for a minimum of 2 years so that nobody has to face the possibility of being cut or riffed over time. So I think, and then there's some other recommendations for some contracted services and things that I'm going to recommend that we walk away from or transition and bring back in-house that will bring a considerable amount of savings back to the school district. So that being said, I wanted to go ahead and plant the seed for staffing updates because a lot of what we talked about today does segue into that, and I know we have many people listening who have had these conversations with me so that I can best address those, but I wanted to go ahead and have Ms. Jenkins, and Ms. Miller, I'll answer your question, but Ms. Jenkins is here to talk about Polk Education Association teacher contract. Ms. Miller.
I just have a question before we get into the details. Two things. I appreciate that you said we didn't do this. We definitely did this because we allowed it to happen without oversight. So from now, I think we need to be very clear on who the oversight is when these things start happening, because it's not, today it seems like we're just talking about the very top tier. There are multiple tiers. Okay, so you're going through all of the departments.
Every single job description in every single department is currently under review for the next 30 days.
It will take you 2 years, Mr. Warren, but I appreciate the effort. We've allowed it to happen for years and years without oversight, and that's where we need, and we're not gonna be able to bring everybody back to where they should be tomorrow, but I'm so glad there's a plan to do that. In asking is there another, other than getting the employees' input, is there another review of efficiency or efficient use of that position? Because an employee who's always had 4 assistants may not need 4 assistants, but they believe they need 4 assistants. How do we decide, is it input from 2 sides to even out that?
So Ms. Winchester's been instrumental in assisting me with this, as has Mr. Bridges. So I initially was under the impression we would have to go out to RFP
Right.
for an equity audit. My understanding is at this time we do not. And so we will be I'll be directly contacting several providers to ask them to submit essentially a different version of an RFP for them to conduct an efficiency audit for our school district. We did something similar several years ago in conjunction with Dr. Vogel and his group, and they gave us a list of things to address, many of which were done. Ms. Porteous did a very good job transitioning us from a very antiquated system of a paper-based system to largely electronic. She was instrumental in bringing about Ms. Solano and her group to help support our teachers, recruitment, retention, and those supports, and that has paid off dividends. If you watch those ladies engage our staff at these community events, it's very impressive, and they're absolutely very much loved by our staff and deeply appreciated. So those were great initiatives, but getting that to job descriptions and, to your point, looking at efficiencies. That's why when I first started, we started consolidating positions, meaning if somebody had taken on the duties and responsibilities that because of a vacancy, elevate that person's role, cash in the other role, this person will get a benefit of a pay raise, but we still get a return savings back to the district. And if my numbers are correct, we saved almost $400,000 doing that alone with just a handful of positions very early on, and we've continued to see savings over time. So yes, ma'am, we will look at efficiencies as well. Ms. Wyatt.
While we're talking about that, I met with both Carol and Wes last week, and they will be doing the same thing with their departments and making sure that our job descriptions are up to date in the school board's office to align with what the rest of the district's doing as well, since they don't really fall under that, but they're going to be doing that as well. Thank you.
Ms. Jenkins.
Mr. Warren's actually going to give us a little bit of an overview of our negotiation process, and then I'll discuss the cost implications with you all.
It will segue to the executive summary. I'm going to be brief in the interest of time, but I do want to bring to your attention several salient points of summary. We're very pleased to bring to you that we have collectively bargained the 21-22 tentative agreements for contract language, including salaries and supplements, and elementary and secondary school emergency relief funded supplements over the next 3 years. In summary, that went out for ratification through the union. It was approved with 96% ratifying the votes. There were a total of 2,520 teachers that did respond to that, so it was approved unanimously. The group began to collectively bargain this issue, looking back to November 19th of 21. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to scratch the word unanimously is the incorrect word, but the percentage is actually 96% of the votes. There was a total number of cast votes to that detail in my correction, and thank you for that, of the unanimous piece of 2,520. Of those, 2,420 were for and 100 were rejected. Thank you for that clarification. My mind was in gear, and I want to go down next to discuss the point number 1, 2022 self-funded employee health plan. The salient point here is we do have increase that is being borne by the district at $40 per employee. That cost has not been passed on to the employee, so there was no increase for employees to see relative to that health benefit. Item number 2 is the 21-22 salary schedules. In summary, the teacher contract has increased from a value of $45,172 to $45,487. We also increased values within the the grandfather teacher schedule, the school psychologist, and the teacher performance pay schedule. You can see those highlighted there. In short, you'll see that we increased everything in the schedule by $210 for grandfathering and for psychologist. For the teacher performance pay, there was an increase of $315 added to each current pay level. That also followed across for school psychologists on that particular pay schedule as well. You'll notice that for occupational therapists and physical therapists, that was likewise also increased $210 for each level as well. The group is also very pleased that we had good work that was done relative to advanced degree supplements. We're going to be seeing increases to advanced degrees over the next 2 years. You'll notice that they were increased this year at the levels of master's, specialist, and doctorate at values of $490, $809, and $1,778. Progressing to that next bullet, you'll notice the following year, you would see an increase again, which would ultimately take it to an additional increase of $491 in a following year, a total of $3,162 for masters. And then for specialists, another increase of $809 for a total of $4,517. Another increase of $1,778 for a total of $6,776 for doctorate degrees. With respect to ESSER funded supplements, again, it was a 3-year agreement. And I want to make the point that all instructional positions that are defined as being covered under the teacher collective bargaining agreement are eligible. The list of those are found on page 1 or 2 of the contract. The agreement was for $1,000 after taxes each year. They're working on that money being paid out in 2 sums. That would come in early in the year in December, and then later in the year in May. And employees would have to be active on the date of that payment to be eligible to receive those funds. And then there is an ongoing agreement with Polk County Public Schools and PEA to continue to work together to add the $1,000 into the salary schedules following the completion of the ESSER funds, which are used to assist with those raises or those values that I just discussed. The teacher supplement salary schedule, item number 4, was also prioritized and reviewed. We added a laundry list of new annual supplements at various values that I'm happy to break apart and tease out for you. But these were based on requested need. and also on a basis to assist with areas that are hard to recruit and workload. I want to go beyond now to the highly effective teacher. If they are on the grandfathered salary schedule, there is an increase there of $500. And then if we have teachers that are in a critical shortage area, there's a list that comes out annually from the Florida Department of Education. They will be eligible for an additional $500 as well. And that assists us with meeting compliances with the differentiated pay requirements required by law. At this point in time, I'm going to pause and in a moment hand it over to Heather and walk us through the financial impact relative to the bargaining components that I've just summarized for you.
Ms. Jagan.
With the new $11 minimum base hourly rate that we've added for our hourly employees, and also our changes to our health fund, the board has contributed $5.5 million to date to ensure that we don't have to pass those costs along to our employees. That brings our estimated fund balance to about 3.9%. That includes salary increases for teachers of $2.3 million, our advanced degree supplements for 21-22 and 22-23, totaling a little over $2 million. Our other supplement changes, those have not been updated for many years, so that totals $5.8 million, bringing us to a total of $10.2. Now, in respect to our fund balance, as you all know, we've submitted several costs for reimbursement to ESSER, which, once we make those adjustments, there will be changes in our fund balance as we move throughout the year. Where in January, we always see it go up and down as we track. So we'll keep the board updated monthly. And our total planned contribution pending approval is $29.5 million from our ESSER dollars. So we're trying to put that funding back into an area where it can aid our employees and also aid in learning loss.
Ms. Fortney.
This may be off topic, but I heard on the news this morning that private insurance is going to be responsible for these home COVID tests. Have you heard that, Mr. Hyde?
It's not related to us. We receive our test kits through the health department, and we distribute them at the school level or through other means. So to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any implication unless an employee went out on their own and sought reimbursement.
No, I think it's the ones that are being mailed to, I don't know.
I don't know.
I just thought I'd bring it up.
I'd have to speak to Ms. Kelly, and Dr. Lutz can look
Yes.
into that with Ms. Scott.
Please, thank you.
Sure. Ms. Fields.
I wanted to know if Ms. Jenkins could give us the information that you just repeated about the fund balance and the monies that's going to need to be available to take care of us not charging staff for the health plan, because that's a big piece.
Yes,
And we
ma'am.
talked about gradually coming up with a very small amount to charge each employee. I know we don't want to do it. I just want to make sure that we are going to have the resources in place to offset that increase.
Yes, ma'am. Our estimated fund balance with all our changes, including changes to the health plan, is 3.9%. It's above our state minimum, but below the board goal of 5%. We've contributed $5.5 million to the health plan. That's with no increase to employee contributions. Our employees are 100% covered, and we haven't added anything to what they have to pay for their families. Our health plan does need a little bit of work in our health fund. That's something we'll have to bring to the board to discuss where we want to go with that so that we can continue to increase our fund balance and meet funding requirements with it as well. And as requested, we have submitted requests to cover some COVID claims, and we will update the board on the approval of that and how that will affect the health fund as well.
I'm sorry, what was the last statement?
The COVID claims, the board had asked previously if we could submit those for ESSER reimbursement, and we have put those in the application. So as we move forward in the process, I'll update you on how that affected our fund balance for the health fund.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we know that our health plan is not healthy,
Yes, ma'am.
and that
No,
we need to make sure that we're aware of that.
No, ma'am. But I want to, just a point of clarification real quick. With Ms. Jenkins, to make sure that everybody understands, minimally, our fund balance is presently at 3.9%. There are other factors, including the reimbursements through ESSER, that we will realize an increase in our overall fund balance at this time. We'll provide a monthly update to the board so that you're aware of what has been reimbursed and what impact that has on our overall fund balance. But we anticipate that should the majority, if not all, of our claims be reimbursed, we will be above the 5% threshold that the board has established. But we'll provide that as a regular update to you so that you know the status of our fund balance moving forward. But Ms. Fields is absolutely correct. We have an unhealthy health plan when it comes to the finances behind it, which creates opportunity. Whether it's pursuing, what Ms. Fields said, the most distasteful solution is passing some of those costs on to our employees, or are there other opportunities for us to secure more appropriate insurance at lower costs through other providers or other vendors? And I think that's the opportunity for us to pursue at the same time. Ms. Fortney, and then Ms. Miller.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Jenkins because I had a colleague sitting on a different board. I don't know if you remember that email that I sent you and how we included our COVID in our plan, and she was very thrilled to get that information, so thank you.
You're welcome.
It was a good idea.
Ms. Miller?
You mentioned looking at other options. First of all, I do appreciate that you're very conservative with the fund balance, but I think we had the discussion before that we assumed that it would go up after reimbursements were given. But I would like to see what other districts our size, similar large-size districts are doing with health plans and how we are bidding that out to other, because rates change significantly quickly. And so I don't want to wait until it's time to do it. I would like to see, what's out there so we can review options before we talking about charging employees, because that's a hard one to sell. And I would like to see if we can be efficient somewhere else with the plans. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Allen.
Great, thanks for the update. And, when I'm looking at the TSIA and that increase, how are we looking comparatively to districts around us? As we looked 2 years ago, I think the goal of the state was to try to get us at 47.5 in regards to that starting base salary, and we're at 45,487. So I'm just curious, if you have some thoughts on that, how we're comparing in regards to that starting salary, because I, definitely want us to be competitive in that range as well. And, I appreciate the cautiousness on the 3.9% as it relates to our fund balance. I'm curious how, and Superintendent Hyde, maybe you could speak to this, what your perspective is on the policy that the board has adopted as it relates to that number. Is it at a point in time, what the board policy states as it relates to that fund balance? I want to understand what you're thinking as it relates to, the way that you're communicating with Ms. Jenkins as well, how we manage that board policy that states we should be at what percentage? 5%. So, because, I appreciate the conversation that it's on a rolling, right? We're considering that, but does a board policy allow that? And I know then, 3.9, boy, we're teetering on that 0.5% where the state says if you go under 3.5, that's not good. Oh, is it 3%? Okay, so
Yeah,
good.
3%.
Thanks for the clarification on that. So
We're not in jeopardy of going below the 3%.
Correct.
My reference to the fund balance is because as I look to Polk County and our future as a school district, providing in successfully negotiating these contracts at this time was a huge infusion of positive energy, and you heard community members come forward. We need to pay our employees, bus drivers, custodians, and others a living wage, and I'm very proud of the work we've done, but it's just a start. We have to our fund balance is reflective of not only our ability to provide ongoing opportunities to provide additional pay raises to staff moving forward so we can retain them and recruit. But it's also a matter of, if we're going to add 50,000 students in the next 12 to 15 years, our fund balance has to then allow us to grow positionally. Even now, we know that we don't have, I would say, from my opinion as an educator, that we do not have an adequate staff-to-student ratio for guidance counselors, social workers, and school psychologists. They're overwhelmed. The number of students, the staff-to-student ratio is incredibly high. And so I would say that when I look at fund balance, I look at what's sustainable. Is 5% sustainable? I'd have to go back and figure out and understand why the board chose 5%, what was the concern at the time, and what were we saving for at that time. But I think Heather and Mr. Pitts, more importantly, can probably bring me up to speed on that. But I always look for a healthy fund balance above 4% in the state of Florida, simply because, again, we have to make sure that all of our revenue and our costs associated with staffing and operational costs are sustainable. So anything above 4% tends to lend itself to that, but 5% I think gives the board that comfort level and that buffer, knowing that as we move forward and we negotiate, and that 5% could be reflective of the $5 million or some number that we were investing in our insurance policy each year, because we did not pass the cost on to our employees at all. I think we're one of two, if not the only remaining school district in the state of Florida that doesn't charge its employees for insurance. And not that anybody has a takeaway that that's what I'm recommending. I'm simply saying, you know, that might be why the 5% is in there, because we know we have ongoing operational costs that are going to show that ebb and flow of our fund balance. And our fund balance, I don't see it going down as much as it will continue to rise simply because of our growth. Property tax revenue, sales tax revenue, and other opportunities. We have new revenue streams coming in that we didn't have previously. So I think our fund balance is in a good place now and will continue to rise because of our utilization of ESSER funds to offset some of those things. I think we've been very thoughtful in our fiduciary responsibility, but investing those dollars where they should be invested and as they're required to be invested. So, but I think we'll see the benefit of that at the end of the school year. I think when we look at fund balance, the most important date is your end of year date. Your end of your fiscal calendar is the most important fund balance date, because that is the number that we will base all new initiatives and or supports for in the upcoming school year. So that's, I think, the date that matters most in my mind. I don't know if Ms. Jenkins disagrees, and she's welcome to, but to me, for my purposes in planning and implementation, that's the most important date.
Thanks for the clarification on that. And if you can maybe speak to the teacher salary increase allocation, just would love to hear your thoughts, just because we're not part of that bargaining process. Was there an opportunity to increase that, or did we cap it out at that and then allocate that to other areas?
We were given $1.8 million over last year's allocation. We had $18 million. So we worked with the union, and this was the maximum amount we could give based on the dollars we received.
Okay.
But we've made, we've had some really, really good collaborative meetings with the union and have made plans and commitments to get that up as high as we can based on our funding.
Great.
Which is part of the fund, part of our fund balance. We're planning for our future.
Awesome. Thanks. And yeah, I mean, I would say, Steffi Oakenham, she does a good job. I don't know if you guys engage the PEA's YouTube page. She gave a good explanation on this contract as well. So there's some good resources in this conversation for us as well. So thanks.
Ms. Fields.
I just wanted to say, if my memory serves me correctly, a lot of what you said is true about the fund balance, but I remember we were not getting the funding from the state during a period of time, and we knew that we needed to have a good fund balance for emergency purposes and stuff. So I think that's one of the rationales for us having a 5% fund balance. Mr. Allen?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, as I'm sitting, I'm listening, we're at 3.9%, so then, ooh, we're under board policy, we should be afraid, so I just want to make sure that my feelings as it relates to the fact that's being presented is accurate and in accordance to what the policy states. And if it's not meant that we go underneath that board policy at a moment in time, so be it. So I just want to know what the clarification was as the policy was established initially. So, and I think that helps what you said, Superintendent Hyde, that it's alluding to at the end of our fiscal year, we need to be here. So if you're confident in that, and that's what I think maybe we should address that from a policy standpoint so it is clear.
Yeah, I think that was the conversation when that policy was set. I think it was understood that during the year that number fluctuates. But I think you're right, the policy says 5, but the intent was at the end of the year, after you've reconciled all the reimbursements, that you would come up to 5. Because there's so many budget things that take place during the year that it does go up and down. But the contemplation at the time the policy was adopted was that it would be 5% at the end of the year after everything was reconciled.
Great.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Ms. Fortney?
Dr. Allen reminded me, I did watch the YouTube negotiations, and it was quite enlightening, and also the explanations. And I have shared with fellow board members across the state those links for how we negotiate, how we came up with our superintendent search, how we did our committee of concerned citizens. And, you know, I believe we, at least the group of people that I know across the state always are asking, what do y'all do in Polk? And then I can send them something good, and it's usually on a YouTube bit or, you know, or a direct email to you. I mean, I just want to thank you because it's collaborative in such a good way. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the superintendent's report. There are 6 items under listed for information, 2 of which I'll address given the fact that they exceed $1 million per the request of the board. The first is the UNISIG Supplemental Teacher Allocation Fund. That is about $1.16 million. The goal of supplemental teacher allocation is to provide supplemental funds to recruit and retain highly effective and effective state VAM teachers who are teaching and impacting our most vulnerable students at the most fragile schools. In order to be eligible for UNISIG supplemental allocation, a teacher must meet the following criteria: be providing direct instruction as of August 30th, 2021 in an eligible school. An eligible school is defined as a Title I school with a 2019 grade designation of D or F, or a 2021 opt-in grade of a D or F. In addition, the teacher must have a state VAM or highly effective or effective rating, whichever is best under the 3 following options: a 2019 3-year aggregate, the new 2021 state VAM calculation that contains the 17-18, 18-19, and 2021 school year, or an Algebra 1 teacher who can use a 1-year state VAM score from 2019 or 2021. And lastly, they have to have a state VAM score comprised of at least 10 student assessments. The preliminary supplemental teacher allocation funds for the 21-22 school year are up to $15,000 for a highly effective state VAM rating and up to $7,500 for an effective state VAM rating. The second grant that's listed here, UNISIG grant, roughly equates to $290,000 per eligible school. Once again, eligible schools are those with a 2019 school designation grade of D or F. There are 3 areas that they primarily focus on: transformational leadership. This includes the recruitment and retention incentive for both the principal and assistant principal, and the performance incentive for a qualified principal. It also focuses on standards-based planning, instruction, and learning. It includes a best standards coach, additional professional learning time, and English language arts supplemental materials to support the new implementation of best standards. And lastly, the positive culture and environment. It includes supplemental pay to promote or supplement safety training at our school campuses. Those are the 2 items that exceed $1 million. Again, as I stated, there are 4 other items. Grants Management Quarterly Report. If there are no questions, Ms. Fortney?
Are you just going to read those?
I was just going to go through them and see if there were any
Okay.
questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Grants Management Quarterly Report, Charter Administrative Services Guide. Both the Charter Administrative Services Guide, you were provided with a crosswalk document that showed you the changes in the document. Head Start Administrative Update. This is required annually. Ms. Fortney?
I have a question on that. On the board executive report, I know that's in November. Have we made any headway in our current vacancies? Oh, there's Carrie there.
My computer's frozen.
And I wanted to say that our
Ms.
funded
Barkin, if you'll
enrollment
come
is,
up for it, please.
our funded enrollment is up too. That's awesome.
Could you direct your question again, Ms.
Oh, I'm
Fortney?
sorry. Hello, thank you. Have we made any headway with our current vacancies as of November at Gibbon Street, Jesse Keene?
We have completed a couple of interviews this week. I had hired somebody for one of the positions at OJP, which is not even on here, and another school took her, so I'm back to the drawing board there. We interviewed several people yesterday. I'm waiting on their answer. We made them an offer, so hopefully those should fill. We did not focus on our coaches. There's no viable candidates. We have been facing the challenges that everyone else has been facing with finding instructional staff. So rather than fill a resource position, if we had a good teaching candidate, we put them in one of our teaching vacancies.
Got it. And boy, that 99.6 enrollment.
Yeah, so we finished November with 938 children of our funded 942. December, we are at 942, and today we are at 942. So we are
Excellent.
fully funded.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And lastly, the copy of donation report. Madam Chair, that concludes the workshop for this morning.
Thank you. Next, we'll look over the agenda for the special board meeting. So the only thing on this agenda is our approval of the minutes for December 14th, and then the teacher contract. Any questions? We went over the teacher contract already. All right. Now, I have a few quick things before we wrap up the work session. I announced in December that we would be doing the evaluations for Ms. Matthews and Mr. Bridges, and then when Yvette and I were looking at the Excel document, it is locked. So I have recreated the Excel document in a JOT form, which will make it's the exact same form, it just is online and will compile all of the data into one form itself, as opposed to having staff take the time to do that. Those will go out this afternoon. Mr. Bridges and Mr. Bridges and Ms. Matthews have both had an opportunity to look over them. It's the exact same form as before. It's just online as opposed to in Excel. And Mr. Bridges has given us the legal stamp of approval that it looks good. So I'm excited about moving it onto a digital platform. I think it'll make things run a little bit smoother. Also excited that JOT form allows 5 free forms, and we only have 4 staff members that we evaluate, so that works out nicely too. The Charter Review Committee, Amato reached out back right as soon as I got elected as chair, I believe, to say that we need 2 more members. So the 2 of us worked together to establish how we typically get members. We went back to see which districts have appointed over the past several years. It seemed to be going in a district numerical order. So we went through the 2 next districts that would be up, would be District 6, so Mr. Wilson, and District 7 with Ms. Miller. And neither one of them had appointed before, as according to our records. So would you 2 be able to and willing to appoint? Yes, Mr. Wilson.
I have a question. I have asked a few people, and the question they have is, what are the typical time constraints, or what are the typical time? How much time would they be expected to spend on the committee?
Ms. Amato.
Afternoon. Yes, afternoon. So thank you, Mr. Wilson. So unfortunately, I don't have a specific time amount that would be required because it really depends on how many applications we receive. We do ask that as the as the community member, that they do review the entire application, because it does impact various sections of their world and the community in which the school is looking to open. We still work with Mrs. Mace, who's our contract advisor, who helps navigate that process, so it does become a little more streamlined. We will continue to offer our meetings virtually through Zoom, so there would not be any requirement for the community member to come to Bartow or to Lakeland. We will still offer those virtually. So it's really a matter of how many applications we receive. But it can be a daunting process.
How long generally does it take to review one single application, if you were to guess? A couple hours?
Yes, a couple hours.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that I would mention is the statute changed a year ago so that a process that used to take place once a year over a period of a couple of months now can take place anytime. That doesn't mean that there will be more time spent, depending on how many applications there are. It just means that it could take place at any time during the year and not just during the old application window.
I think that's preferable for you. You don't have 7 to 10 applications at one time. You could, but you also have the opportunity to stretch them out over the year.
That's not necessarily always a great idea, because it does tap into district leadership that is also needed to review those applications. And we have a 90-day turnaround time, and that has not changed. So we could actually have multiple 90-day timelines overlapping each other while we're reviewing multiple applications. Dr. Allen?
Thank you. Just maybe giving some clarification on how recommendations come forward. Just as a new board member, I do have community members that have actually reached out to me about serving on that committee in particular. Maybe background of how many individuals currently serve on that committee outside of our appointments. Maybe just help me have some frame on that a little bit.
So I spent a little bit of Christmas break going back through all of the minutes to figure out where our appointments have come from and who appointed each of them, which was a lot of fun. And there's a lot of handy tools in our board docs now. But we have 3 community members. So we previously had 1, and I believe it was in 2013, they decided to suspend board policy to add 2 additional, and then formally put it into board policy later. So there are 3 community members that serve on the oversight committee at any given time. And then there's also several that I'll let you speak to.
So the board does select 3, and then we have about 23 additional variety of district leadership, from curriculum, certification, HR, PD, you name it, facilities, transportation, food services, and we all take a part.
Nice. It is a room full of people, and it is a substantial lift. It is an important committee, and the duties do take, there's no use kidding ourselves. This is a committee that requires some elbow grease.
Are you speaking from experience there?
Ever since 1997. Yes, sir.
Absolutely understandable.
Are there any more questions on that? Just so the 2 of you know that have appointments coming up, the timeline, we do have one that we believe will be submitted on February 1st. So if it is at all possible to have your appointment before the end of January meeting, that way we can get them onboarded and make sure that we have community members representing us, that would be helpful. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Cunningham?
And I would like to suggest, if Mr. Wilson, for example, doesn't currently have someone in mind, but yet Dr. Allen does have a community member who spoke up. I mean, this is a very fluid situation. So, I mean, I'm just saying, if it didn't happen now, he might be next. But if you have someone that could fill in quickly and move forward, that might be something to think about. So it's kind of what we've always done. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, so I will know something by the end of this week, and if I don't have somebody that will work, I'll reach out to
Perfect.
Yvette, and she can reach out to Mr. Allen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. Any other questions? All right. And I believe that was my last update. At our December meeting, we had discussed using the board comments in this section for any updates from either conferences or committees that you serve liaison on. Does anybody have any updates? Ms. Fortney?
Yes, I attended the Central Florida Coalition meeting, and the main focus of the meeting was legislative updates from different counterparts of Ms. Wendy Dodge from the Central Florida districts. They did have some superintendents present who shared their concerns from legislation that's possible in Tallahassee. Their big concern, the superintendent rep, was revenue problem, how ESSER funds have saved us with that revenue problem, and the $15 an hour compensation for staff was a big concern. Mental health of staff and students, and of course, school safety and security. Some of the FSBA concerns shared were progress monitoring bills for assessment and accountability, trying to grow our own teachers through grant programs, and then there was so many possible pieces of legislation that were discussed. Everything from civic literacy, bright futures, IEPs, school bus safety, school zones, trying to read my notes here. Senate Bill 1300 was discussed. School concurrency was a big topic of discussion, about striking the language and making that a district-wide assessment.
Ms. Fortney, just before you move on, I spoke to Representative Killebrew yesterday, and he's offered to make an amendment to that so that it would best suit Polk County to keep big districts able to operate a little bit more efficiently in that manner.
Thank you,
So,
Ms. Wyatt.
just so you know.
Tell Representative Killebrew, thank you. Because the capacity will be challenged, for sure. And there's some talk about new FEFP language, and somebody has filed a bill, House Bill 587, Senate Bill 298. Once the starting salary target is met, to Dr. Allen's comment, that we have a little bit more flexibility with the money that is being sent to our district as far as veteran employees. And that's about it.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Anyone else with updates? Dr. Allen?
Well, yeah, maybe just a recap on the last half-cent sales tax oversight committee. I just want to say thanks to Ms. Usher. An initiative that came forward, I know Alice Hunt has probably spoken to a lot of you guys, hey, let's get a sign at every physical plant that's being under construction that notes, the contributions of the half-cent sales tax initiative, and that's what this is. This construction is being prompted by. So happy to say that that sign has been completed and what it's going to look like and the design of it, and it's going to then be deployed at every construction site, noting that. So I appreciate Superintendent Hyde and Ms. Usher for initiating that, as well as, the plaque that's going to be at each location as well. Then, transitioning from that committee, junior achievement's coming up, haven't had a chance to meet with that. I do want to hear a little bit about the curriculum committee that it's a new committee, right? So Superintendent Hyde, maybe something in line with that committee, when that's going to start, who's chairing that committee, so I know as well. Sorry for my tardiness today. First day of the semester with Florida Southern, so I had to service my classroom as well. But I tried to tune in with your conversation around Nearpod and some of the other topics. But I did want to speak to the Nearpod there for a moment. As I heard the discussion, as we move forward into that next work session to discuss it, we talked a lot about the interactivity of the tool and, what the impact, meaning the outcomes of that tool, but we didn't really talk a lot about the content of the pods that are within Nearpod. So I just want to make sure that we're addressing not only the form, but we're also addressing the content and how that's being deployed within the classroom and managed from an oversight perspective. So, when we think about the enhancements, there's always reversals. To me, like the automobile, for example, reversed us into traffic jams. Although there's an enhancement to the automobile, it reversed us into something. So as we move to enhance the classroom in some way, I want us to be aware of what kind of reversals would be coming our way, and how do we prepare for that. Obviously, it's been in the classroom for a while, but I'm just curious how that management's going to take place. But something needs to change its function as well. So is there something we can take away? There's a give and take as well. We're going to spend, this amount of money, but is there a particular piece of software that we could take out of deployment because this is going to fill that gap as well? So just a couple thoughts to recap on earlier conversations that you were having within the agenda. So glad I can make it and be back to celebrate what's going to take place in a few moments.
Thank you. And just a reminder, you should have an envelope on your desk that has your invitation to Polk County Day if you want to join us in Tallahassee on January 26th. The Florida legislature did begin their session today, so send lots of nice notes and kind words to our legislators in Tallahassee. I believe that concludes our work session. And do we want to take a 5-minute recess before I'm seeing shaking heads no? Move straight through? Okay. All right, so we will conclude our work session. And let me pull up the other one. Okay, our tech team needs to take a break, so we will be back here in 5 minutes. They've got to get the next channel started for the video feed.